The Ramsey County Board of Commissioners meeting is now called to order.
Fretham?
I will call on Commissioner Maris Castillo for our Pledge of Allegiance. And we should all meet.
Madam Chair, we need to call roll.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Would you please call the roll? Okay.
Fretham?
Here.
Maris Castillo?
Here.
McDonough?
Here.
McGuire?
Here.
Carter? Ortega?
Aye.
Reinhardt?
Here.
Carter?
Thank you. Here. And now I will call on Commissioner Maris Castillo to give our Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll all mute while you do that for us.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag and to the United States of America. As soon as I got distracted, let me start over. I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It's a quirky morning. I couldn't even figure out how to mute, so I just moved my lips. Thank you all very much. So we have the the agenda of our July 28th meeting before us for approval. Is there a move?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank
Second.
you, Commissioner McGuire, Commissioner Reinhardt. Are there any comments, questions on our agenda? If not, would you please call the roll, clerk?
Maris Castillo?
Yes.
McDonough?
Aye.
McGuire?
Aye.
Ortega?
Aye.
Reinhardt?
Aye.
Fretham?
Aye.
Carter?
Aye, and thank you very much. The agenda is passed. We are on to our minutes from the July 21st meeting. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioners Maris Castillo and Ortega. There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? If not, would the clerk please call the roll? Thank you.
Maris Castillo?
Yes.
McDonough?
Aye.
McGuire?
Aye.
Ortega?
Aye.
Reinhardt?
Aye.
Fretham?
Aye.
Carter?
Aye, thank you very much. The minutes from July 21st are passed, and today we have the opportunity to recognize pretrial, probation, and parole week. I'll call on Commissioner McDonough for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to read the proclamation that's been signed by all 7 commissioners and by County Manager Ryan O'Connor. Whereas July 19th through the 25th, 2020 is the American Probation and Parole Association's pretrial, probation, and patrol week, honoring the women and men who have served as probation officers, assistant probation officers, correction program workers, and support staff at all levels within community corrections. And whereas the national mission of probation parole is to protect the community and enhance public safety by reducing the incidence and impact of crime by clients who are supervised by community correction agencies. And whereas the operating principles of the Ramsey County Community Corrections Department include helping people change, offering opportunity, providing accountability, and ensuring equity. Whereas probation officers and community correction staff at all levels carry out the tasks necessary to protect the community, promote positive behavioral change, increase healthy development, hold probationers accountable, and to provide support to crime victims by helping them understand and exercise their rights. Whereas juvenile probation officers serve youth ages 21 and under who are under supervision in the community or in residential programs, while also offering support for their families. Whereas adult probation officers work with sentenced clients in our communities who are 18 years and older, and those who may be serving sentences in treatment programs or local correctional facilities. Whereas our probation officers in Ramsey County provide a number of essential services and interventions, including investigations for the district courts, community monitoring, intensive supervision, risk and needs assessments, cognitive behavioral programs, employment referrals, mental health counseling, residential and correctional program, reentry services, and an array of other services. Whereas the Ramsey County Community Corrections Department employs a professional, dedicated, and highly skilled team of juvenile, adult, and program probation officers, assistant probation officers who devote their time to helping people on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis with a focus on restoring trust and creating hope. Now, therefore, be proclaimed, the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners declares July 19th through the 25th, 2020 as pretrial, probation, and parole week in Ramsey County. And Madam Chair, if I may just say a few words here, because this proclamation really dealt with the day-to-day work that our probation and parole and support staff do in our community and supporting individuals, but also supporting the community when individuals come into our correction system. What I really want to call out is they've been doing this in a stellar manner and ensuring that all the things that we talked about when they're working with the individuals assigned to them, when they're out in the community, they've been doing it in just a way that really has an impact. But over the last 5 years, they've also seen tremendous change within their department and within the approaches and how we move forward on all the things we talked about in this proclamation. And I want to recognize that their efforts and their dedication is noticed and appreciated, that we will continue to evolve as a community corrections county. We'll continue to evolve on how we work with individuals that come into our system and taking new approaches, that ensuring that equity, ensuring that the focus is on changing helping people get to a spot where they want to be in their lives, where they're productive in their lives, where they can contribute in their lives, and managing that change and still accomplishing the goals and the missions of this department. This board, on behalf of this board, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you that worked in this area. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McDonough. I want to appreciate that you've mentioned the great transformation that is going on there. I see the hand claps that are in process here, and I also want to note that there are people in the chambers and would like to recognize them right now as they introduce themselves and share comments with us as we recognize them today. And so we'll go to the chambers, and thank you for being here.
Director of Community Corrections, and I just want to say thank you so much for that proclamation. Thank you for the kind words of support for our staff and for the work that we do each and every day at Community Corrections. This is an honorable thing for us to receive. We try to do it annually, and of course this year has been an unusual year. So we normally have a pretty large group with us. But we've got some great representatives, and I will have each one of them introduce themselves from the various parts of the department, including our RCCF, Adult and Juvenile Probation Services, and our JDC as well. And we're honored to be here. Just again, the theme of this particular theme is restoring trust and creating hope. And as many of you know, we talk about hope a lot. And the Hope Star, which I think I got one on, or maybe I had on my other jacket, right there. The Hope Star, really helping people change and giving them opportunities, and that's what we do each and every day. I have asked Cordell Nichols maybe to introduce himself last and just say a minute about the work that he's doing in the area of cognitive behavioral interventions that are really designed to help people change in the long run, really provide them with resources and skills that'll help them maintain hopefully a positive adjustment to life far beyond the term of probation or any term that they serve with us in corrections. So thank you very much. Lieutenant Miller, you want to introduce yourself?
I am Anthony Miller, Lieutenant Miller, Ramsey County Correctional Facility.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Seth Macy, Adult Probation, Family Stability and Homeless Unit.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Roy Adams, Ramsey County Juvenile Probation Supervisor.
Thanks, Roy.
And my name is Cordell Nichols, and I work for the Administration and Community COG Programming. John asked me earlier to speak about Community COG, and what a venue to speak about COG, right? It's a lot of influential people. But it's really about, Community COG is really about meeting clients where they're at, offering them that ability to, transcend, just not even come in to the facility, but going outside into the community, meeting them out there, eliminating some of those barriers that they have in terms of getting to probation offices and doing the work out inside of a building. I'm really nervous, so please bear with me. But we're really working on changing the way clients are thinking, changing the way that they by addressing their thoughts and feelings and how that influences their behavior. And that goes into the long run. We want to work with clients so that can transcend outside and not just in a group environment. We really try to work with clients on terms of their ability to actually take in the curriculum, understand it, and present it back to us, right? And that's part of it, of their growing. We want to make sure that when we're sending them out in the community, they have a firm understanding of what they've learned and an ability to actually have the expectations from us produced into the community. Again, I'm really nervous and I apologize for that, but so we really work hard with clients in terms of giving them the ability to have that self-efficacy. Once we start working with them, they start getting the curriculum, they start understanding it, then they start feeling proud about that and they go out in the community and want to do it and want to do it for themselves. So we really try to help them to get that foundation set and that confidence within them to actually understand that a lot of clients are living in survival mode, and actually giving them that opportunity to slow their thinking down and really understanding how their thoughts and feelings drive those behaviors, right? And paying attention to what those thoughts and feelings are telling them to do is really helpful for our clients. And once they can see that, they understand that they have the ability to change, and only they do, which is important. And anything we can give them, they still have to take it for themselves and take that ownership for themselves to make those changes. And we really try to support them with that, build that confidence within them, so when they do go out into the community, they have that confidence to do it themselves, apart from the training that they've learned. So it's really helpful, and I enjoy it a lot. And I think it's really beneficial for our clients to really see that, because a lot of times our clients are very reactionary. They just do. And if we can slow down that thought process and get them to understand that there's things that's happening before you just rush into stuff, it's really helpful to them. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate my coworkers and everyone who has gotten this really good opportunity. So I want to thank you guys and appreciate everything that you guys have done.
That was a rousing applause and well-deserved. We thank you so much for being here with us. Is there...
Are you smiling at me?
I want to just make certain that we don't cut your comments short. And I'm also seeing that we have some comments from commissioners. I believe that I saw the photo being taken. I'll go back up front just for any completed thoughts from Director Clavens, perhaps.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I think Cordell said it best. I couldn't have said it any better. It's really about helping people change. It's about giving them opportunities and hope. I want to recognize, too, the great work of Lieutenant Miller here and the RCCF. We have a number of fantastic correctional officers that do interventions, many of them trained in cognitive behavioral interventions themselves, running groups. Seth behind me and Cordell both worked at Boys Totem Town, and so those skills that they brought to the program at BTT actually came out into the community and have really translated well, and I'll talk more about that during our workshop today as well. but they really highlighted some critical things that we continue to work on. Roy Adams has done tremendous work in the area of reducing juvenile out-of-home placements. He's been a pillar of that work, trying to really take a look at what we do in juvenile probation, the decisions that we make, and really it's because of Roy and his team and the work that we continue to have a much smaller group of youth that are placed in out-of-home programs and served more locally in a community-based fashion. So this team is incredible. I'm very proud of the work they do, and I'm very proud to be the leader of this department, and I thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to commissioners for your comments. Commissioner Matas Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think you did a great job, Cardell. You didn't sound nervous at all. Remember, I messed up the Pledge of Allegiance this morning, so you're solid. But I just wanted to really say congratulations to you. I'm wearing my Hope pin as well, and I'll wear it this week on your behalf. And really, I think that you are doing work that so many people don't realize how hard it is, because you are working with people who oftentimes you might be the first person in their lives that have really invested in them in a big way, and that goes really far. And so I just want to thank you for that, and for the care and for the love of individuals from our community to help them get into a better place and to be part of society in a really great way. And so I just wanted to really say thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Matas Castillo. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I second, you did a fabulous job. All of you did a fabulous job. I had the opportunity to listen to clients that have gone through the cognitive behavior training. And I have to tell you that each time when you listen to the people that it's really impacted, you see just how big of a difference it makes. Brought me to tears, quite frankly. So again, just as Commissioner Matas Castillo said, people need to know that they're cared about and they're valued. And that's what cognitive behavior and learning how to deal with your own emotions, that's what that gives people. It gives them that hope. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. Commissioner Fretham.
I want to echo the thanks, and thanks for Commissioner McDonough for bringing this forward, and to everyone who spoke here. I think it's hard to go from one model that wasn't working and take those skills and transfer them to a new model, and change is hard. So I really want to applaud you for taking those skills that you developed and putting them to good use, and for being willing to do the hard work to change and to really improve outcomes for people. So that is so applauded, and we are so grateful for those efforts. And then I just want to say, as we continue to evolve and be more inclusive, and thinking about what was said about connecting with thoughts and feelings and how those impact behavior, I just had one thought about this proclamation and potentially future proclamations without taking away any of this amazing work that you described. And the words women and men, and wondering if potentially in the future we could use the words people as a more inclusive term, because some of the wonderful people doing this work might not identify along that gender binary, and to ensure that all of our staff are included in this recognition, that going forward when we honor them, using a more inclusive term might be more appropriate and might reflect that cognitively, that recognition that we want to honor everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fretham. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to add my thanks and appreciation for all of the work that you all do. I have been involved with community corrections since my days in the legislature, when I was fortunate enough to carry that legislation and really help make it better. And you have all been just great examples of the amazing work that CCA does in our communities. And you're just such a great model for, I know the state looks at us and sees the great work and learns from that. I just want to say, too, that I've been lucky to go to the CCA conferences, and if ever you want a conference full of hope and full of good works, and just to give you the sense that things are happening in a really great way in our in our counties and in our state, go to a CCA conference, because they are really highlighting all the great work that they're doing to help our community. So just thank you for all of that work. I just made a note that I want to send this clip to our legislators, because they're actually considering CCA funding now, and to our chair, Carlos Mariani Rosa, who's a Ramsey County legislator and chair of the Public Safety Committee, to all of our legislators in Ramsey County, that they understand the great work that you're doing. And this will really be helpful as they are thinking about how they divide our resources, that this is just one area where they really need to invest, because you're all doing such great work. So thank you for all that you do for helping us make our communities the best they can be. So really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo what my colleagues have all said, but I also want to say that you folks are the front line. And what's important is not what the legislature thinks about your work, but what the community thinks about your work. And that's tremendous work. And I get the feedback every day from different folks in the community, and I think you're making a difference. You're where the rubber meets the road. And without you, most of our work doesn't have much meaning unless we could show folks that there's a better way of doing things, and we could get good results for all of us. So thank you very much for such a great job.
So once again, I just want to underscore that you do, our Community Corrections Department, put the community in corrections. And we do get that feedback daily, as Commissioner Ortega has said, as all have commented, you are doing leading work, all of the people in our Corrections Department. You are representing us well, and you are changing the work so that we can change the outcomes that we see. And we all just want to say a resounding thank you so very much. We are looking forward to your participation in the workshop that will follow this morning, our Health and Wellness Service Team workshop, where we'll hear more about that work. But once again, thank you so much for being here with us today, for sharing aspects of the work, and for allowing us to recognize you during this important week.
Madam Chair, I'll just wrap it up as everybody takes off. To Lieutenant Miller, John, Seth, Cordell, and Roy, thank you all for being here this morning, representing a department of hundreds of dedicated individuals. It's too bad we can't all crowd in, but those are the rules right now, and we need to follow them. And we're excited to hear more today. And commissioners, just a preview for you all, August 11th, which I'm sure will get mentioned briefly today, we'll be back on the pretrial side with the next huge step in that space. It's going to be a really exciting piece to the puzzle. It's years in the making on that work, and so in the coming weeks we're gonna continue to make those moves and bring before you the next big step in our transitions and progress moving forward. So thanks to all of you. Cordell, I'll end by saying I've known you for almost 10 years, never seen you nervous until today, so there's a first for everything, right?
I've done a lot of meetings on Zoom. So.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
So today we will be moving into our COVID-19 update, per usual during this COVID response, and I'll call on County Manager O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, good morning. We're going to take a slightly different approach today to what we provide as the update. I'm going to turn it over to Director Hadeen to share the information and our speakers who are going to help us with that.
Thank you, County Manager O'Connor, and thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'd like to welcome up here Tommy Godwin, Kim Closey, Carolina Ramirez, and Mark Jackson. I'm delighted that they will be taking the pressure off of me this morning and actually highlighting the amazing work that's happening right now within the Public Health Department, within the incident command structure, to really dive into what's happening on the ground in our community, what the data is saying. I will show you some sample maps for us to utilize to help us understand how to continue to respond to COVID-19. We'll talk about and connect that to our community outreach and engagement, and then give you highlights of testing that we've been a part of and testing that's coming up in the near future. So the presentation will be on a PowerPoint. So Tommy, go for it.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Tommy Godwin. I work in public health as a planning manager, and my non-COVID work is to lead the planning and performance improvement team. And during this public health response, I've also been leading the case investigation and support branch in public health that does case investigation, contact tracing, and service to COVID positive residents who are isolating at home. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak to you about our data. I want to show you a quick outline. As Kathy mentioned, we're going to do some sample maps and data with you, talk about our community outreach work and testing, and then leave time for discussion. I owe a debt of gratitude to our county GIS section who helped with this work. We're always working out a lot of bugs in how our data works, how it feeds into our county open data portal dashboard, situation update, and how we can display this data geospatially while still protecting people's private information. You'll see on these maps that the distribution of COVID cases across Ramsey County is not uniform, and that combined with our understanding from statistical analysis not on the map, we know that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, as well as populations of low economic resource. A little bit about where the data comes from. This is from the case database that is administered by Minnesota Department of Health. The access to this database is shared by local public health agencies, and it's the database that contains case information about people who tested positive for COVID-19. The information we collect on these cases demographically comes from initial testing, so their address and name and usually phone number, and some racial and ethnic demographics are collected at the time of testing and submitted to the state lab. And then further information is gathered during the phone interview for those we can reach to conduct an interview. That work is shared between local public health and the State Department of Health, so our county residents are being called by people who work for the state and people who work here for Ramsey County. Then the data that you'll see on the map is collected by address and then geo-coded to an XY coordinate. We don't show you those points on these displays. We are aggregating them to census tracts right now as counts and as density per area. There's much more analysis that can be done, so I'll jump into the maps, and what we're hoping for from today's conversation and going forward is how to continue linking up the map displays with our statistical analysis we use on a situation update. So here is one view that shows you the density of cases in Ramsey County per square mile by census tract. The darker tracts are a higher density of cases. This is not normalized for population, it's simply case intensity per tract. And then displaying that slightly differently, you can see the circles here that show you relative intensity of number of cases over the population density in that tract. Here's a better zoom in of the legend of the increased number of cases and a little bit of color coding on the circles. I'll show you on the next, here it is with commissioner districts. So you can see the detail there of where we have a higher case incident in the county. Much discussion has been had about looking at where the populations live who are more impacted by COVID-19, and then looking at the cases themselves, this is a good moment for me to mention who's not in our data, and that is, as usual in the American healthcare system, people who have low access to resources or who may avoid testing unless needing to be hospitalized. So people who believe that they have manageable enough symptoms to not seek testing or medical care are not in this data. And this is, and then I'll go back to the maps that you're looking at. This is a simple overlay at this time. We aren't displaying the racial demographics of the cases on a map. So what you're seeing is case counts, all of the cases, laid over the population density per specific census demographic. So on the left-hand side of the screen, this is the percent population ranging from less than 8% to greater than 32% of people who are Black, African American in the ACS data as of 2018, with our cases overlaid. Similarly, on the right-hand side, percent Asian and Pacific Islander in the census data with our cases overlaid. I'll caution against, from a statistical perspective, correlation and causation. This is truly just a context piece at this point, and we can continue to do deeper analysis as our response continues. These are the last four race and ethnicity slides or the last two, pardon me, of race and ethnicity slides where you see the distribution of Hispanic ethnicity, again by census data, and tracked, and then percent white non-Hispanic on the right-hand side of this slide. We've begun the conversations about putting the vulnerability analysis and putting these kind of weighted factors that create higher vulnerability to COVID-19 and economic insecurity and hardship on the maps. These are two looks at some of that data. There are many more options for that, which we can continue to explore with the GIS analysis and with my planning colleagues in public health. So on the left-hand side, the color intensity is the presence of low-income housing, so it's a number of units, and then again, keeping the case counts overlaid on that context. And on the right-hand side, it's persons without insurance. Also, this is all census data still from the U.S. Census American Community Survey as of 2018. Okay, heading into just one quick thing about the data before. So the maps you're seeing are a point in time. It's all of the cumulative cases up to about July 16th while we paused to do this analysis. To continue the work, we'll have to keep working on our workflows to do the regular updates. And we'll just take whatever guidance we get from you all on that. Moving forward, there's been work both in public health and at the incident management team level to map the context of medical assets, including testing sites, hospitals, pharmacies, urgent cares. And so this is one look at that map with the cases distributed. And then a preview of some work that the IMT planning section has been doing in partnership with GIS to add the context to our to a web GIS map about where testing is taking place and other medical resources. I'll leave the rest of the testing map to my colleagues who are speaking about that section. So just what's next for us then is to move forward trying to link together the dashboard and situation updates and statistical analysis by demographic group with the mapping context and really put those side by side as much as possible. If at some point we have a large enough number of cases, we can do that in limited fashion also within the geographic context. So we'll keep working on that. With that, I'll hand it over to Kim Closey for community outreach.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Tommy. Commissioners. I'm Kim Closey, and I am in health.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I couldn't unmute quickly enough. But before we move on, there are a couple of hands raised, likely on the last presentation. I want to check in with Commissioner Ortega and then Commissioner Maz-Castillo. Thank you. Same difficulty, I'm sure. Okay. I know you're gonna come in right when I call on Commissioner Maz-Castillo, but let me go to Commissioner Maz-Castillo first, and then we'll go back to Commissioner Ortega. Commissioner Maz-Castillo.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Tommy, I love the maps. They're very helpful to get an idea. I'm wondering if we have that same map overlay related on current cases or active cases, because I think that's the totality of cases since the start. And since we know that people recover, do we have that for current active cases?
Thank you, Commissioner. The short answer is no.
Okay.
The longer answer has to do with calculating the isolation period for cases. So people who get a positive lab test and then the moving time window of 10 to 14 days worth of cases. Frankly, with the total daily numbers that we get right now, distributing it, they're low enough that distributing that on a map is not a very realistic thing to do. So we could light up maybe a zip code, but even I'd have to look at the data. I think the counts are not high enough to even do a zip code level distribution if we only talk about who's currently infectious or contagious with COVID-19 and not yet out of their isolation period.
Great, thank you. I guess in some ways that's good news that our numbers aren't that high that it could do that, but it definitely would be a way to track hotspots. But thank you very much. Great work, Tommy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure, but I believe that Commissioner Ortega has indicated no question. Is that correct?
Right.
And thank
Correct.
you. Then I will move on to Commissioner Reinhardt and then Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you. Well, as a longtime advocate for the use of GIS data, I was really pleased to see that it's so much more obviously than just maps and street addresses and so forth. It is really about how we can make really informed decisions. And I know that the GIS folks often do not pat themselves on the back for the work that they do. So I appreciate the fact that you started out with that as well. Again, data. We need data to be able to make the best decisions moving forward for everyone in Ramsey County. And some of that was not shocking per se because we've been getting updates. But when you see it on a map, it's much more tangible, I guess, to really look at it and say, wow, there's a huge difference, and we've known this. So I appreciate the fact that you have put a lot of work in, obviously, to getting the right information for people in GIS to track and to use those maps. And it's going to be interesting also to see over time how those change. So thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner McDonough.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I want to reinforce good work. This is really helpful. And not so much a question, but really truly a comment and observation. It saddens me that there's really no surprise here because we could take the history of any public health issue or any chronic disease and do the same work and we're going to get the same results. We've talked about the social determinant of its health. We've talked about, zip codes predicting your health. And I think, as we continue to evolve what our conversations are, what we do as what's important for us here in Ramsey County, I mean, the fact is this is just a racial determinant of health. And it doesn't matter what we track, we're going to get the same maps that you showed us today with COVID. And we've got to start calling it out and we've got to start addressing it for what it truly is. And, recognizing that there's social determinants of health was a step in that direction. Recognizing that your zip code will determine your health was a step in that direction. But the fact is, it is a racial determinant of health. And I just want to call that out. I want to recognize the work that you guys have done to help continue to reinforce the inequities in our system so that we can continue to do better for our residents in Ramsey County. Thank you.
Thank you for reinforcing that message, Commissioner McDonough. I have no further hands up, and we'll go back to the presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as we transition to Kim, I'll just add on to Commissioner McDonough's point. And yet, while there should be no surprise to this, many of our leaders who are presenting here today and our department head continue to sit in statewide forums where surprise or consternation at the information in front of us remains a reality that we need to continue to break through. And so as leaders here in this community who say this isn't a surprise at this point, and it shouldn't be, any help you can continue to have to reinforce that message on a regional and statewide and national level, we will continue to do our part. And I want to thank these folks here for doing theirs, and we appreciate your support.
All right, Kim, back to you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for having us here today to present. My name is Kim Closey. I am in Healthy Communities in the Public Health Department. In my non-COVID role, I work with a lot of grants, and I work with the Violence Prevention and Authentic Connections program. Under the COVID response, I am the branch lead for the community outreach team. So we actually started with one team of community outreach way back in March, and since then we have developed and evolved into 3 teams, and so we've divided them as you see on the screen. We have a team that focuses on the Hmong and Karen community. We have a team that focuses on the Latinx and East African community, and then we have a team that we affectionately call everything else. It's African American, youth, older adults, public housing, and violence prevention. Altogether, we have 23 staff that have been redeployed to work on these teams, and they come from all different areas of public health. I want to call them out. We come from Healthy Communities, the WIC department, which is Women, Infant, and Children, Environmental Health, Child and Teen Checkup, Health Protection, and Family Health. Among those staff, we speak 6 languages: Hmong, Karen, Spanish, Somali, Oromo, and Amharic. Most of those folks have been deployed at about 50%, so they still have regular jobs that have to get done in addition to the COVID work. What we do as an outreach team, we reach out to people. We reach out to our existing contacts and new contacts as they come up. We provide prevention and education information. We create and review materials. Our team does a lot of interpretation review and approval. Some of the materials are listed here on the screen. We work to promote healthy behaviors. We're not an enforcement team, but we are an education and a promotion team. And we connect people to resources, whether it's public health or housing or food, whatever else the county has to offer. We like to make sure that people know of all of the things that the county can do. And we respond to inquiries. We get a lot of inquiries. Some of them are quite unusual. Some of them are always, where's my mask? Can I get some PPE? Do you have any hand sanitizer? That kind of thing. But we're constantly responding to people's questions. Lots of different ways that we do it. We do it electronically. We are all really good at using Zoom all of a sudden, or MS Teams. We do a lot of newsletters. Our team has probably, we have a Hmong newsletter, an aging newsletter, public housing announcements, violence prevention action team newsletter. The reach is more than 300. The information goes out weekly. We have regular connections with district councils, public housing, chambers of commerce, churches, businesses, all kinds of agencies. And then we do virtual events. We have done presentations to Oromo community leaders. We have done a presentation to Sprockets. We have done a Train the Trainer event with the local imams in which we presented talking points, and then they turn around and take those talking points and send it out to their connections, which is hundreds of people. We have regular staff. We have staff that show up regularly on radio shows. We have Hmong radio and Latinx radio. We have a social media. One of our Karen staff posts videos on Facebook. She's done nearly 30 of them, and literally the reach is tens of thousands of people that have seen it and hundreds of people that have shared it nationwide and worldwide. And one of the things that we do then also is go out into the community. We've been to local markets, focusing on ethnic and cultural markets, providing information there, giving them signage and posters to put in their stores. We actually we're giving them the floor decals to say stand 6 feet apart. We've reached out to housing, different apartments and low-income housing areas. We've reached out to child care providers, home-based and adult daycare providers in the Hmong community, providing information about best practices. We've had events at beaches. I think Kathy mentioned that at the last meeting at McCarran and Phelan. And then last weekend, we went to a soccer event, and that's what these photos are from, connecting with people, engaging folks, and giving them information. We do community outreach at the testing events. We've been at Jimmy Lee and Harding, and then we will be at the next two that are coming up, which are the next presenter will talk about. For the ones that are coming up, we're going to be focused on pre-registration events. So we'd like to go to where people are, like Hmong Market and other areas where people already are convening, and get them registered ahead of time. Show up with a laptop and talk them through it and show them how it works. We develop educational materials a lot based on whatever the need is. The most recent one that we're working on is what to expect when you get a call from the contact tracer. If you get a positive test, you'll get a phone call, and that takes people by surprise sometimes. So we want to give them the information ahead of time so that they know and are ready for it. We work closely with many community agencies. We promote and advertise the events and through the radio shows that people are on, through social media announcements. And then our staff is on site at the events. We serve as greeters and registration people and traffic control, and our staff often serves as interpreters. So who do we reach? Lots and lots of people. We reach out to lots of agencies and businesses. There are individuals that we'll call our staff members. Our staff are trusted leaders in the community, and people come to them and with all kinds of questions. Some are related to public health, some are not. They connect people and they help navigate systems, and they provide support and resources. We collaborate with other state agencies. We work with multi-partner networks. We connect with medical providers. We work with other departments and units within Ramsey County. We've been working with human services and congregate living providers. We work with lots of other branches within the incident command system, testing, contact tracing, essential services, the Medical Reserve Corps, and quite heavily with communications. You guys are familiar with RESERT. That's the Racial Equity and Community Engagement Response Team. And you know that their purpose is to advance racial and health equity to create effective community engagement. And we overlap with them, and we partner with them in some areas. And so one of the things that the research team has done is they have made grant awards into these two different areas that you see on the screen, the trusted messengers and the media messaging. So what our role was in that is we announced that funding opportunity to our networks, and some of the people that we've been working with actually were awarded the funds, and now they're doing the work. We are actually having, we're calling it a lunch and learn, even though it's going to be virtual, so you have to bring your own lunch and eat it by yourself. But we're going to have a lunch and learn with those awarded agencies and our outreach staff, so they can learn about what we do and we can learn about what they do, and so we can better serve and support each other in moving the work forward. And I just wanted to lay this out because there's some questions sometimes about what's the difference between outreach and the research team. And so I really think that outreach is, we're extending services to folks. We're responding to requests. And the engagement is long-term, bringing people in, inviting them to participate, and bring together, create something new. So. And then what's next? It's always changing. We are tracking the incoming requests for testing events. We get phone calls and emails all the time saying, can you come to my apartment building? Can you come to my agency, my workplace? And so we're starting to track those, and so we can make good decisions about where we go based on the data. We're responding all the time to changes that come from the state and city. Every time the governor has a new executive order, we have to adjust what we do. And we want to make sure that we're basing our actions on the data, which you just saw from Tommy. So that's it. I will turn it over to community testing unless there's questions.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you very much. I do have a question from Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much. This is just really exciting how you're reaching out to the community and working with our trusted partners, and it's just crucial that we, of course, let our community know what we're all doing and bringing our services to them. Can you talk a little bit about how we're engaging our cities in Ramsey County and you know, maybe our legislators? I know that you're working with district councils and things. You know, we have city newsletters and we have legislators do newsletters all the time too. So I'm just wondering how we can be helpful in getting our other elected officials within the county knowing about this work so that they can spread it out there as well. Because, you know, we want to be good messengers of all this great work, and I know they would too. So just if you could talk a little bit about how we're working with our other entities in Ramsey County, other levels of government.
Yes, actually, we are the community outreach liaison team, and there is a city liaison team as well. And so that's it's a whole nother team. And so they connect with their city leaders regularly. They attend the weekly meetings with Ryan, I believe. And so they have direct connection with city leaders.
And if I could follow up, could we get a list of who they are? I mean, yes. I'd love to see who they all are, and if we could get a list, because I'd love to connect with the liaisons in my cities, just so we can make sure we're, you know, sharing all the great information and really helping be that. So sure. Just you can send that maybe up to all of us as who those liaisons are.
Sure.
That'd be great.
And we do have regular meetings between the combined liaison teams, so we know what they're doing and they know what we're doing a couple times a month. So, but I will get that list to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. If there's no other questions,
Commissioner, I'm sorry.
There is.
Commissioner
Okay.
McDonough, please.
Yep, thanks. I do have. No, thank you. This is really thorough and amazing work, and you guys have just done super job here. But connecting everything that you laid out back to the first presentation on where everything is, and it was hard to tell, but it looked like a couple of the biggest areas of concentration were in our public housing in McDonough Homes and Roosevelt Homes. I could be wrong, but it looked like, from the best I could tell from the map. And I'm wondering, and then you did mention in your last comments there about working with apartments, you're getting calls from apartments, they want testing there. But actually, you know, working with where those concentrations are, which probably for the most part are public housing or big apartment complexes. And are we working with those owners, those landlords, and public housing to actually get right into that area where they live, rather than trying to connect with them at Hmong Market or Hmong Village and hoping they're showing up there or hoping they're showing up other places, but actually going to right where they live? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. We've done a variety of things around housing. We have one staff person who actually works with public housing through her regular job under the SHIP grant, and so she is our liaison and our connection to public housing. And she's been involved in providing education to them, as well as food distribution and formula distribution events, that kind of thing. We've been in contact with Common Bond, who owns several housing units, and they have lots of messaging in their buildings. We offered signage and postings and that kind of thing. And in relation to particularly Skyline, what we did is we worked with the building owners and the security guard there as well, but also we then went to the markets in the immediate area, and we created a half-page piece of information that we call the bag stuffer. And so then we gave it to the markets, and then they can drop it in people's grocery bags and send it home with them. So it's information, it's in English on one side and a different language on the other side. So people know the basics of hand washing and distancing and some basic information and getting tested and that kind of information. So it's a both and. It's working with the property owners and the people that are living in the buildings and also the surrounding areas.
Perfect. Thank you. Good work.
Thank you very much, all. And we'll go back to our presentation then.
All yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Caro Ramirez. In my non-pandemic response role, I'm very lucky because I'm an emergency preparedness specialist for health protection, and it coincides with my response role as a community testing branch director because my main mission is to plan for and execute testing sites. And for me, my happy place is a 16-hour shift at a testing site in heat and cold. I don't care. That is my happy place, and I would trade that instead of being here doing public speaking because I'm super nervous too. Okay, and so I'm gonna just jump into my first slide. But before I address these, I just want to maybe take a few moments to define some of the types of testing activities that we are doing. And so the first one is community testing. And community testing is basically testing provided as a result from a defined ask from like a specific community for that community with input from that community. So it's a very collaborative effort. Then we have mass testing, and mass testing is essentially a high capacity, large scale testing operation where we don't screen for symptoms and we don't screen for exposure. That I would say is what we did at Jimmy Lee, just big operations. And then the third type of testing is targeted testing. And targeted testing is where we use data to help us identify outbreaks that are happening or could happen. So this would be like a meat processing plant. Specific location, specific target. And so with those three in mind, community testing and mass testing and targeted testing, what our testing support branch is kind of aiming to do is a combination of community testing and targeted testing where we are not only responsive, but we are receptive to requests from the community to do testing, but then we are also using data from Tommy's branch, Kim's branch, from our data managers so that we can find ideal locations where we are being basically responsible and accountable to our residents, but we are also being responsible with our resources, primarily like test kits and staffing for these events. Any questions on the definitions? They're kind of just being developed. Any questions? Okay, I will move forward. And so on this slide that you're looking at, so we have two sites at local public health. So our county has had, I would say, a support role in the first two at Harding High School and Jimmy Lee. And then the planned community testing sites is where we are taking on more of a leadership role. And so we'll describe those.
Ms. Ramirez, you asked 4 questions, and there are a couple of hands up.
Oh, okay.
I have Commissioner McDonough and then Commissioner McGuire.
I was slow on getting my hand down. I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on that map that you've got up there, so you said you work with communities and communities can request. So like I'm looking at New Brighton, which is the northwest corner up there with some bigger circles too. So I'm just wondering, so would New Brighton need to reach out to you and say, we'd like to be a testing site? Or I'm just curious how, as an example, how that might work. Because we've got, an area up there that may need testing, but I don't know if we approach them to say, do you want us to be, or do they have to come to us? Just if you could talk a little bit about how that might happen.
Absolutely, great question. So we are still in the process of developing a framework that is fair. It would be unfair for us to only rely on partners who have access to our outreach team or our team. So we're trying to use the data that we have in collaboration with our partners. So I guess in answer to your question, it's still something that we're developing together.
And just one more piece, if I could add on top of that, Commissioner McGuire, Director Hadeen made a direct ask a week ago Friday to the cities with their CARES money to build mobile testing capacity within our cities across the county. And so that ask is out there, and I would encourage you to continue to encourage New Brighton, based on the data you're seeing today, to take us up on that offer, to be a part of a collaborative effort to expend those CARES monies in a way that deploy mobile testing resources into the field across the county.
That's great. That's great to know. So I'll talk to my cities and encourage them to do that. Thank you.
Keep going? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to my next slide. So our testing support branch came about, as I mentioned. MDH reached out to local public health departments, and so we were one of those lucky sites. And so they asked for our participation in staffing their site at Jimmy Lee. And so we were at Jimmy Lee for about 6 days, starting June 9th through the 24th. And the first day of operations, it was more of a trial. There were a lot of moving pieces, different partners, and so our department was basically the operations of it. We were developing the work, the flow of the layout, the staffing, the training. And so that first day we were running maybe 200 tests. And by the end of that afternoon, we kind of found our rhythm. And so the next day we tripled to 600 tests. And by the end of these operations, we totaled 6,000 participants who were able to get their testing needs met. And so out of these 6,025 clients, there was a positivity rate of about 2.3%. So I'll invite Mark Jackson here to help me out.
Thank you, Carl. I'm the Deputy Director of the Testing and Support Branch. I'm a COVID-19 Program Specialist for Public Health, and up until now, I've mostly been working with the homeless population in the COVID respite. So in a more focused, Jimmy Lee was quite a broad site. As you can see from the photo there, we had 4 tents, and drive up, I think at our max day, we had 1,500 cars, 1,500 clients actually. So the next week, we actually stepped it down a little bit, and we supported the Native American Community Clinic at their essentially walk-up site at Harding High School. You can see in the photo, it's a much smaller scale. In 4 hours, we saw 237 clients, and our positivity rate was slightly above Jimmy Lee at 3%. And so you can see the different sizes that we're capable of supporting. So both sites were done in close coordination with SEOC, as Carl mentioned, Minnesota Department of Health, and the actual labs. The lab support is done at Mayo, so these tests are actually shipped down to Rochester. And then, of course, with Medical Reserve Corps of Ramsey County, we had a lot of volunteers who were critical in making this happen. MRC is still supporting, and as we speak, supporting Open Cities at their drive-up appointment-only location in Midway, Dunlap and University. Some of the issues that we identified with the drive-up testing, I wouldn't really call them barriers, but they were something we hadn't quite thought about, and that would be access to a car. The timing of it, the Jimmy Lee sites were basically 9 in the morning or 10 in the morning until 6 p.m. So if you're at work all day, you may not have been able to come over it, and that was on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So we're looking at changing the dates, moving those to the weekend to get a different profile of folks who are able to access testing. And then improvements can be made. We particularly started this at Harding with the advertising and the promotion of this, and we hope that will lead to a better turnout in future events. So we're going to continue to work with our state and local partners to kind of replicate Jimmy Lee, but just at different sizes, different scales, depending on the neighborhood where we're trying to focus. And now that we have the mapping data, that becomes much easier for us. We definitely don't make this testing exclusionary. It may be focused on a certain group or certain neighborhood, and we can tailor that with Kim's group in our outreach. And by pre-registering people during outreach, we get a better sense of logistics that helps us coordinate with our partners, request the correct number of tests, avoid running out at the end of the day, things like that. And then our approach is in line with the Lieutenant Governor's 5-point plan, particularly points 1 and 2, which is to broaden access to community testing in their trusted community sites and meet people where they are, and also increase our testing by federally qualified health centers. So I'll give it back to Carl now.
Excuse me, let me just call on Commissioner Maris Castillo, who has her hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. See, I've been participating in many conversations with community about how to do this outreach best, and the issue around both cultural and religious beliefs and testing and how testing is done has come up quite a lot. And so I just want to make sure that we're also taking and hearing that information from community about, there's some religious beliefs and cultural beliefs about whether to get tested, what happens if they get tested, and then also addressing the issue of there's been a lot of confusion with people getting tested and then receiving a bill. And of course, those aren't our testing sites, those are other testing sites, but just to make sure that we're addressing that confusion in any of this outreach and really going into and being invited into spaces as opposed to us asking them to come to us. So just more of an observation and sharing of information.
Thank you. I don't want to pass up the opportunity to respond. I do have a question from Commissioner McDonough, but I'll go back to the presenters first, in case there's any response there.
Thank you. I'm actually addressing that in our next slides, I believe.
Okay.
So site selection.
you.
So for
We'll hold. We'll hold.
So for
Commissioner McDonough.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Carter. Are we limited by the availability of test kits in any way, or how close are we to the capacity in our ability to actually test in the community? How much more aggressive can we get in with the planning that you guys are putting together to actually do more testing in the community and deeper testing deeper into the community? And at what point do we start getting worried that we don't have enough test kits and some of the capacity issues to be able to actually follow through on testing?
Commissioner McDonough, at this point, we are being assured by Minnesota Department of Health that they will support us in our needs for testing kits. They are still not getting to 20,000 tests a day across our state. And so at this point, we should be able to be supported with the amount of tests that we need with the planning that we've created. And this team here has been communicating with the state emergency operations centers, testing command center routinely to ensure that we have what we need to move forward. But thanks for the question.
Thank you. So we'll go back to the presentation.
Thank you. So hopefully this will address Commissioner Matacasio's questions. So site selection, there is this quote that I read in a book once that says, "Nothing about us without us." And so in planning these testing operations for the month of August that are tailored for the Hmong and Karen communities based on that community requests from those populations to the outreach team, what we did is we set up a preliminary meeting just here internally with Ramsey County, and we brought in the outreach team, who were the people who heard first accounts from these communities, what they wanted. They wanted testing operations. And so using some of the members from the outreach team who are deeply embedded in their cultures and their communities, we identified 5 potential sites using their feedback. And so the sites identified for the Hmong and Karen communities were the Washington Tech School, Johnson High School, Aldrich Arena, Phelan Rec Center, and the Community School of Excellence. And so our Hmong American Partnership, some of their members contributed to the last site location. And so based on that, Mark and I were tasked with actually going to each of those 5 sites and doing a logistical assessment for doing a hybrid model where we can accommodate drive-ups and walk-ups, where we can have enough space that we can accommodate education stations and resource stations so that we can have navigators on site that can help people enroll for insurance, that can help answer questions, that can help answer those questions. What if I'm COVID positive? What if I need a letter from my employer? What if I need resources at home if I am sick, etc.? So that's what we were looking for in a site, large enough to accommodate resources for the community. And so it just happened that Mark and I identified Washington Tech Magnet School and the Aldrich Arena as our top 2 sites, but we kept that to ourselves because we wanted to hear back from our partners. And so while we were doing all of that work, Kim and her team were engaging the community. So they were using surveys via social media platforms, in-person surveys at churches, I think was one of the sites. What else?
Just direct.
And direct feedback from partners. And when we got together again just internally, it turned out that those partners and the community had identified the same sites that we ranked as 1 and 2. So the meeting after that was a meeting when we brought in all of our stakeholders. So we brought in mHealth Fairview, we brought in the Karen Organization of Minnesota and the Hmong American Partnership, and we presented some of the information that we are sharing with you today. How we came to these locations, how we want to make it not just no barrier. No barrier, I think, has been defined as not checking for immigration status, not checking to see if you have the insurance to pay for it. But for us, no barrier really means that if you don't have an appointment, we're not going to turn you away. If you have a language need, we are going to help you on site. So we are there for you. And so we shared that with our partners, and they agreed that Washington Tech and Aldrich Arena were the ideal sites. And so from then on, we presented possible dates. We explained our rationale for having a 6-hour testing operation. We explained that traditionally we have it on the weekdays, but they countered that they wanted weekends. And so we are listening to them so that we can make it accessible to their communities. And so for the months of August, the weekends in August, we're doing weekend operations, Saturdays and Sundays. And I kind of outed myself during one of those meetings because I was saying, we can probably start early and end later. And they were saying, no, we have to go to church. And I said, oh, I just outed myself. I don't go to church. And so basically using their feedback, we are setting up these testing operations to meet their needs. And so I guess it's just how it also coincided that these two sites, I believe is Washington Tech is zip code 55117 and Aldrich is 55109. And so these two sites are in those communities that are experiencing high positivity cases. Yep. That's what I heard. Anything to add?
Both sites are on transport.
Oh, thank you.
Public transport.
That's right. So both sites are on a bus line to make it also accessible to our, and it's open to everybody. So even though we are focusing on our Hmong and Karen residents, it's open to everyone. And our outreach efforts will communicate that also. And so, like I mentioned, the first two sites that we did at Harding and at Jimmy Lee, we had more of a supportive role. So moving forward at Aldrich and Washington, we are taking on a leadership role. And so we're using our experience from those two sites to basically guide us in how we can increase our capacity as quickly as we can, as efficiently as we can, to run small-scale and large-scale operations, and to run them quickly if need be based on the data that we're getting. Ideally, to kind of predict where an outbreak might be happening and for us to be more responsive to those sites. And I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, so as Carl mentioned, we're learning quite a bit from those previous sites, and those are informing our planned sites. These are the ones we've mentioned so far, by no means it. These are all happening as we speak, but in the background, all the conversations as we try to expand to different locations are happening. So yeah, again, using the maps and identifying partners with Kim's team to target all those areas that are of concern. So we're in discussions right now with Open Cities, who we already have a relationship with, to expand their testing and move into mobile. And then Minnesota Community Care, we also have a relationship with them, and those talks are in the early stages. We have initial conversations with Clues, but we do have an urgent need to start expanding testing in the Latinx population. And we are very much open to a wide range of testing locations, sizes, and community partners. And again, in collaboration with our teams here.
Madam Chair, with that, we'll stand for any questions that you may have. I want to thank all our presenters again, Director Hadeen, all of Public Health. We wanted to do this dive into our work across the various areas of outreach and engagement, how we specifically are thinking about mobile testing, how we're trying to use data and continue to refine it. Kathy and I realize that we've spent many weeks talking at you from our perspective, and that hearing from some other voices might be helpful to this work. And I just want to thank everybody who is continuing to give all of their time and effort to the COVID response, which is nowhere near the end. And as we head into the fall, a pretty scary time. But thankfully now we have a few months under our belt, at least from which to build, and additional capacity coming online through these community-based testing sites, and the additional investments that the county is going to continue to make in that space with our CARES funding to ensure that we can be as responsive as possible as we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this comprehensive and broad update on the work that's going on in our community. I really appreciate all who've been here to share with us. And I do have a couple of hands up, so I'll go immediately to Commissioner McDonough and then Commissioner Natascia.
Thanks, Chair Carter. Great work, and I really like how you're connecting it to the data and then building in the community outreach and then building that plan based on that community outreach, and it's excellent work. The one area that we didn't talk much about, and it may not show up in the data, is what are the approaches here working with our sheltered and unsheltered homeless population, because they may not be showing up in the data on those GSI maps. And that population, of course, we know is certainly very heavy in people of color, and but what are the conversations around ensuring that we're providing access to testing and engaging with those two populations?
Madam Chair and Commissioner McDonough, today was a presentation for our community testing and how we're moving that forward. Testing in our congregate care settings and homeless care settings and the respite center have a different set of guidelines. And so with our respite care and our connection with Minnesota Community Care and healthcare for the homeless, we actually connect with them through that process to ensure that our homeless community also has testing needs as appropriate and based on symptoms as well.
Yep. Madam Chair, if I could follow up, and I appreciate that. That's, and that's the response to kind of the sheltered, right? The ones that are showing up at Safe Space or Higher Ground. How about the unsheltered that are not showing up at a congregate space in our community, right? They're a part of our community, and they certainly are in our community. What are we doing there to make sure that we're staying on top of the testing and the engagement piece with this community?
Thanks for the additional question. We have staff within our 555 Cedar Clinic who actually go out into community and respond to sexual health needs, but they and others who are in community who are working in partnership organizations with our homeless population work with us to help us identify people who we can help respond to. So we have different methods and different ways of making sure that we hear about and provide resources to people who may need them.
And
thank you very much.
If I could just add one last piece on top of that, Madam Chair, which is, I think what you're hearing is we're doing our best through as many means as possible, but if you want another reason why encampments are untenable and an inhumane way to think about protecting people and broader community as a whole as we go forward, the protocol around congregate sites is far more prescriptive and far more effective, quite frankly. And I think this is another point to why we need to keep pushing for dignified shelter options for everyone across our community.
Thank you for underscoring that point.
Yeah, well said.
Commissioner Mas-Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for all this really great information. I'm really excited about the expanded test sites, and especially at Washington Tech, because it is a great location in my district. And you're starting testing on my birthday, so I'm excited to volunteer for my birthday with the testing sites, because that's such a great opportunity. I also wanted to just share, I was on a call yesterday around the need for testing in the Latino community, and the Mexican consulate was very eager to volunteer their space. So you might be tracking that, but wanted to put it on your radar. I do have one question about what are the turnaround times? So we're hearing different information about turnaround testing. Could you just address turnaround times on testing?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner. For the tests that are where the test kit is provided by the State Department of Health and submitted, the turnaround is really fast. It's probably, it varies, but it's 2 or 3 days in terms of tops, in terms of the lab result. And currently the combined workforce of case investigator contact tracers are keeping up with that, so that as soon as the lab result is posted, that person is getting their first attempted call that same day. So from the time you go to the testing site to the time that a contact tracer might call might be anywhere from 2 to 4 days.
Thank you very much. Commissioner McGuire has a question or comment. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just thanks again for all of this work. I just want to highlight another area, and just if you wanted to talk about how we're connecting with our schools, or is that a different liaison? Is that a different group that's working on that? Because this is the community outreach. So are you reaching out to our, you said we have city liaisons reaching out to our cities. So do you have school liaisons reaching out to our schools is what I was wondering about. And just wanted to put in a plug for our Ramsey County League of Local Government, for who's ever reaching out. You know, they're a group of our cities and school districts and other entities that are working within Ramsey County, and they would be helpful in getting communication out as well. So I just hope that we're accessing, you know, existing organizations to help us with this communication. So just curious, are there school liaisons as well, or just talk a little bit about how we're connecting with our school districts, because they're working with our families regularly now on food distribution all summer and in the school year, of course. We'll see what else they're going to be working on with our families.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, schools, you know, we do not have a set of defined school liaisons would be the simple answer to the question. It's more nuanced than that, obviously. The food distribution work is aligned with our food and basic needs work. You know, the schools are clearly focused on the build up to this Thursday's decision by the governor around what the fall is going to look like in public schools across the state of Minnesota. I think I'm probably your school liaison right now. The superintendent and I spoke late last week and again early this week, and continue to be in close contact as we coordinate. And for example, our last conversation focused the most on technology needs at home and how to think about leveraging the work happening in the county to think about technology, which we've talked about with all of you some in the past, and the overlays into schools and how they are thinking about and approaching that topic. So I think right now, if nothing else, it's an administrator to administrator conversation happening. I know that they are fully consumed by the meal delivery and trying to figure out their contingency planning for the fall, but rest assured we remain in close contact.
And Commissioner McGuire, in addition to that, on the testing end and the contact tracing and case investigation end, I suspect that schools will be similar to like long-term care centers, where the Minnesota Department of Health will have a cohort of people who will be connecting with schools to deal with any school outbreaks, and we would be support in that instance.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that information.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I'm sorry, Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. I'm just wondering, last week you had said that our testing positivity rate was at 8.4% in Ramsey County. I'm just wondering what change, if any, we've experienced in the last week.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, I don't have updated data as of right now around positivity rate. I would suspect it's around the same. The data takes a while to get to us, and so I'm happy to follow up with you. I would suspect it's still around 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, somewhere in that range.
I believe that is all the questions that I have, unless I see somebody raise their hand at this point. I want to go back then to the presenters and allow you to complete your presentation.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to the steps that we're taking to take a look at data, to take a look at how we engage community and outreach, and then how we're looking at testing moving forward. We appreciate this, and I want to thank Tommy and Mark and Caro and Kim, as well as Laura Anderson, Gina Pistolka, and Kathy Filbert, who are also here, and they lead the operations section of our incident command within public health, who then leads the work that was presented to you today. So thanks for the opportunity today.
Once again, thank you so very, very much. It has been quite a comprehensive and complete presentation of how you're doing the work out in our communities, how you're outreaching to the community, and providing our plans based on that information. So we appreciate it. I want a quick check-in with Commissioner Matas Castillo in case there is a final question. There is not. All right. So once again, thanks for the COVID update. I'll check in with County Manager O'Connor as we wrap this one up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just do a real-time schedule check with you, my ask would be if we could have 5 minutes to transition into the Health and Wellness Service Team presentation and move folks around. We'd be back at about 10:30. And because this was a pretty comprehensive conversation that went a little longer than initially planned, I just wanted to flag for you now, If it is of interest to you, we have some of the day on August 11th. We have a relatively light board agenda. So if we do not complete all of the Health and Wellness Service Team presentation, what we could do is bring some of it back to still get everybody out by noon today, as I know schedules are tight.
That is very helpful. Thank you very much. I know that it will be fine to take that 5-minute break. We'll do that right after a brief moment of silence, as we know that we are still in very, very trying times, and we want to recognize the issues that still exist within our community. We'll take 30 seconds for that moment of silence, and then we'll break. Thank you for the moment. Thank you, Commissioners. We will break and return then at 10:30. Thank you. complete. We know that Commissioner McGuire. And as as our community will recall, at the beginning of the year, we altered our committee structure as a board to align our board committees to the structure of our county. Commissioner Nicole Fretham is chairing our Health and Wellness Committee. And so today I'll be turning the meeting then over to Commissioner Fretham as she leads our workshop for Health and Wellness. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Carter. Well, we will be getting started today with the Health and Wellness Service Team Committee of the Whole, and Karen Soltis, our Deputy County Manager in this area, our interim Deputy County Manager, will be leading us off. So I'm assuming she is ready to go in the council chambers. Karen.
The dedication, passion, creativity, and spirit will show through this morning. I just want to let you know that we do not do this work in isolation. We work in partnership across our service team with other county departments and across other service teams, other program areas, as well as in collaboration with our community, as was heard earlier today from corrections as well as public health. We strive to constantly improve how we serve the residents of Ramsey County, but we must continue to do better. The Health and Wellness Service Team took a slightly different approach than the EGCI, and we incorporated a broader range of topics, and our materials are at a higher level, a summary level. But just so you know, you can get much more deeper, detailed information. We can get that to you afterwards if necessary. I also want to make sure that I mention that there are some very key areas today that we're not going to discuss. And one of those is in financial assistance services led by Tina Curry. So I want to thank her and her staff for all the work that they are doing. Veteran services led by Maria Weatherall has also been doing some incredible work. And those two areas will likely be part of future workshops. And of course, also want to recognize the work of the Public Health Department, as you witnessed just previously. And we get weekly updates by Kathy Hedin. So our staff and our leaders have worked tirelessly to provide quality services in this time of uncertainty. I encourage your input and welcome your feedback as we move through the presentation. And as I said earlier, happy to provide additional details as necessary. Since we have so many different sections, we are going to pause at the different section areas with those presenters, and you can ask questions at that time. My prepared notes said that time would be tight, and so time is even tighter now, but we may adjust that as we go. And Commissioner Fretham will do a good job of keep us moving along. So right now I want to talk about, on slide 2, our workshop goals. Basically, it's to provide updates and to gather input from you on the critical work that is occurring within the Health and Wellness Service Team. And also, this will likely be postponed to August 11th, but the intent is to gain your support for some upcoming requests for board actions. Our agenda. First, we want to talk about our 2020 top initiatives, talk about upcoming board action items, and welcome your questions. So I want to describe a little bit about our 2020 top initiatives list. So in April, we quickly realized that we were going to be in the response of the pandemic for a while, but the county manager asked all the different service teams to talk about what and to think about what you would still like to get done, what
what initiatives you have that are very important to still work on and do despite the pandemic. So that's how we created, as part of our morning check-ins with the leadership team, we brainstormed and came up with around 10 top initiatives. And on slide, I think that's slide 5, we have, in no priority order, we have 5 items that we're hoping to talk about today. The first one, and even though we don't have these in priority order, the Advancing Racial Equity and Community Engagement initiative really infiltrates our entire work across the service team and goes deep. So in that respect, Sarah Hawley will be giving you more information around that initiative. The second one is the justice reform information. John Clavens will be talking about that area. The child welfare reset, Ann Berry will talk about that area. IT modernization and stabilization, Jennifer Schuster-Yeager will give us some updates on that. And the early childhood area will be a combination of Jennifer, Ann, and Kathy Hadeen. On to the next slide. Other things that we know are really very important to work across our service team and that you have already heard about. Number 6, transforming systems together. So there was a very powerful board workshop on June 16th where Catalyst sat at this table and talked to you about the transforming systems together work. So we knew that that was work that we wanted to continue on with. Number 7, Healing Streets. We also had 2 individuals come that represented the Healing Streets work on July 7th and talked to the county board. And 2 weeks ago during the EGCI board workshop, we talked about the housing office establishment and how that's going to move forward into the future. So with those items, I will ask that Ms. Sarah Hawley, our Racial and Health Equity Administrator, come forward to talk about the first area, which is our racial equity and community engagement work. Take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Ryan. Madam Chair, Commissioners, and Ryan, thank you for having us today. I'm excited to be here back home with my people, Health and Wellness Service Team. As you all know, I've been redeployed to represent and have the privilege of co-leading the research work that we're doing as in response to COVID-19. But today I'm here to reflect on the great work that the Health and Wellness Service Team is doing around advancing racial equity and community engagement. So Madam Chair, Commissioners, and Ryan, the Health and Wellness Service Team has worked to improve and increase our efforts around advancing racial equity and community engagement that intentionally centers community voice through community-driven solutions and initiatives through shared decision-making. And I can't stress that enough, that shared decision-making is really important in the work that we're doing. And I'll talk momentarily about how we're doing that throughout our Health and Wellness Service Team. These efforts, as you can see on the slide, align with our countywide strategic priorities of advancing racial equity and inclusive and effective and meaningful community engagement. We are working, as Karen has mentioned, across the Health and Wellness Service Team departments and with community to be intentional about leading with race. This requires a shared understanding and knowledge base that must address the deepest and most entrenched disparities and unmet needs that have impacted historically marginalized communities in Ramsey County. In 2020, as Karen mentioned, Health and Wellness Service Team has been increasingly more intentional about leading with race in our work, engaging community in the following ways. The Health and Wellness Racial Equity and Community Engagement Action Team, which we also call REAT or RESEAT most recently, which includes community members and Health and Wellness Service Team staff representation from each department. In 2020, we launched 7 subgroups in December, January, and February with the focus on community engagement, policy and practices, data and systems, safety and justice, procurement and contracting, finance, and leadership training and development. I want to talk about some of the outcomes of these subgroups. With our safety and justice subgroup, this group worked to help plan meetings with Ramsey County leadership, the Sheriff's Department and his team regarding the 2016 incident at the ADC. The primary objective of this meeting was to increase understanding of expectations from community on how we can work together with the Sheriff's Department and Ramsey County leadership to deconstruct barriers in our county to advance racial equity. The incident that occurred at the ADC offered an opportunity to learn from the past and create solutions for the future with the sheriff and his team. I'd also like to talk about the Health and Wellness Service REACT members and the partnership that we created with DIOD, Maria Sarabia's team, and our EGCI, Safety and Justice, and IPR, Racial Equity Administrator, Prince Corbett, to develop a framework for the county's racial equity competencies for staff at all levels. That was really great work, and it was intentional to create those partnerships around how we do this and frame our work around racial equity in partnership with HR and other service teams. I also want to mention that the Racial Equity Action Team members also provided continuous feedback and engagement on policies, processes, and practices at the county through department discussions and presentations that were done at our monthly meetings. This included information and input on the legislative platform, our community engagement policy work that was led by Ms. Lydia Germa, input on the development of the Office of Housing with Max, and also input at one of our last meetings pre-COVID around the supplemental budget and performance measure work that was happening within health and wellness. We also are proud to say that our Racial Equity Action team actually provided input on the development of the proclamation for racial healing that we presented to the board in January 2020. The Health and Wellness Service team has also been intentional about engaging community and centering community voice through these initiatives, including work that we've done around the culturally specific services definition work out of social services with the African American community. This is now also known as Kujichagulia 2.0. We've also done work and had representation on the St. Paul Indians in Action Committee. We've worked with community providers through our Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. We've also convened the TST Catalyst that launched the official work with community and county leadership in a shared decision-making model that will facilitate rethinking how we deliver services and invest in community. We've continued our work through financial assistance services through our work with Ramsey County United, which obtains community feedback on how we improve service delivery and financial assistance services. We also provided input, as I mentioned earlier, around the creation of the Office of Housing Stability, with trying to ensure that community voice is a part of those future decisions. In corrections, we've provided space for community healing in circles at the RCCF. In social services, which Ann will talk about later, our diversion work has been really important. But I also want to mention the targeted culturally specific services contracts that we've done with community that have been really intentional around creating community voice and space to work intentionally with our community partners. I want to talk about public health and the Healing Streets initiative that Karen just mentioned, our birth equity work and the strategic planning that public health has done throughout the year to center our community health assessment that many of you probably do know about. If you don't, please check it out. It's really important work. I also want to talk about the intentional work that Veteran Services has done to do outreach with our underserved communities to reach veterans that we know are in need of services. And last but not least, the Health and Wellness Admins Division work to better understand and work with our partners around how they understand racial equity and community engagement through the contracts and provider services that we work with in community. Lastly, our 2019 COVID-19 2020 town halls which Health and Wellness kicked off, really reached out to communities such as veterans and impacted residents, our community partners and contractors during this time. And that work was really important because it really responded to the community's needs and response and asks around what we're doing to redesign our services during this time. While we have aimed to improve our community engagement efforts and center community voice, we still have a long way to go in uplifting that voice of the most impacted residents in our county in order to improve our county operations and put residents first. This work is important pre-COVID, in the midst of COVID-19, and after this pandemic has passed. The co-creation of solutions will be even more necessary and expected by our residents and community partners. In addition to our community engagement work, we began discussions as a service team about the need to build capacity and resources and infrastructure that embed racial equity in the fabric of our work, through discussions of establishing an operational structure and plan to increase the capacity of the racial equity administrator and staff to more effectively and efficiently work across our service team. We also want to embed race and health equity into the day-to-day operations, decision-making, services, and programs that impact African Americans, American descendants of slaves, American Indians, and other underrepresented communities in Ramsey County. During COVID-19, we have worked as a service team with key points of contacts in each department to improve our service redesign plans by working to apply a stronger racial equity lens, building knowledge and understanding of why we are leading with race in order to improve the delivery of services during this crisis to the residents that are most in need. We are also working to improve our requests for board action. As a service team, we want to move beyond stating the problem and disparities. We want to dig deeper into the historical and root causes that result in despair, unrest, and poor outcomes in historically marginalized communities. And so with that, we need to be intentional about how we describe the racial equity impacts of our past service delivery systems, how those impacts have impacted community, and how we plan to deconstruct and change the way we plan to deliver services, how our operations impact community, and what the immediate short-term and long-term impacts will be when a racial equity lens is applied. We also need to get a better understanding and knowledge base of what we mean by community voice, participation, and impact. Lastly, in 2020, we hope to build on the racial equity policy statement that was discussed here last week. It's important that we co-create the solutions and continue to build on that policy that was developed in partnership with the Health and Wellness Racial Equity Action Team, Ramsey County Staff and Leadership, and our Health and Wellness Service Team, Racial Equity Administrator. This work is important that we align our work through stronger and more meaningful partnerships with community and county-wide, with our other service teams and your leadership. Thank you for your time. Now I'd like to turn it over to Director Clavens.
And Madam Chair,
questions.
I would just suggest that if we have questions, we'll go topic by topic with you all so that we can make sure to address them.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. We do have about 5 minutes in our allotted time for this section to address questions, and I see Commissioner McGuire has a question, so go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you so much, Sarah, for all your great work in your department and countywide, the work that you're doing. You mentioned it at the end of your remark, and I just wanted to know, or I wanted to just maybe have you state how you're working with other service teams, because I know you're doing a lot of work within the Health and Wellness Service Team, but you know, we obviously don't want 4 silos of service teams. We want all the work to be done, and I'm sure you're working on that, because in for instance, our Economic Growth and Community Investment Service Team with our parks, roads, and libraries, you know, there definitely needs to be a lot of our racial equity work there. And I know that you presented. We were so excited that Prince Corbett presented at our Active Living Ramsey Communities meeting, because they were very interested in hearing the work of the research committee. So I didn't know if you wanted to expand any more on how you're working with other service teams within the county, because that's such important work that we are countywide, and I know you know that, but I just wanted to call it out again.
For sure. I have no hesitation on sharing this work across our service teams. Thank you, Commissioner, for mentioning that. I think with the assistance and leadership of Prince Corbett, we've been very intentional about working together, not just during COVID-19. I think with Prince starting in his position back in October, which seems so long ago, but it really isn't, we've talked about how we're going to do this work together intentionally. And we know that even within, I'll give an example of the Racial Equity Action Team, we've been doing work around safety and justice, right? And so we know that partnership is going to be key with Scott Williams and Prince Corbett and their team around how we move forward and advance racial equity with that service team, with our service team, and alongside communities. So that's just one example of how we're finding synergy. Both Prince and I work together on our racial equity action teams. Prince is in the process of launching a lot of his work still as he was beginning his leadership into his own position and getting to know the work in our departments. And so I feel like we are definitely working in tandem more strongly as we respond to COVID. And I think that builds for a great platform and kind of kickoff to the work work that we want to do in partnership with our service teams, but also the strategic team, and the fact that we're really looking forward to and can't wait for the new racial equity administrator that will be working directly with the strategic team to help lead this work. I also want to mention that we are constantly talking about how we create a comprehensive plan around advancing racial equity and community engagement. And it would be no excuse of our own if we didn't take the opportunity to engage the hardworking staff and community that is really helping lead this work. And so when I talk about embedding racial equity into everything that we do, into our day-to-day operations and program services, we must work together. And so those silos that exist maybe through our service teams can exist in our racial equity work at the very moment that we know that we have some shared decision-making and power, and not only that, knowledge that we want to share, not only from both Prince and I's lived experience, but from community experience. So thank you for asking that question, and hopefully those examples meet the needs of your
Sarah,
question.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, just two other things, just as by way of reminder, because I think it's part of our own reinforcement over time and our own governance and structural model. So for racial equity, community engagement, budgeting, performance measures, and contracting and procurement, we have a countywide governance structure, and then we have service team level action teams as an implementing force. Because the danger of having only countywide work is it flies too high, and the danger of having only service team level work you already described. It is in that mix of multiple levels. You need to have both an organizational structure day to day and a functional structure that exists in the organization to drive our work and break down those silos. And Sarah doesn't know I'm going to do this because she doesn't even know I got this email, but I got an email from somebody who works on one of those action teams recently. And I'm just going to read you a couple lines from it. Because of my participation within this team, I'm being able to actively utilize my leadership skills through taking the lead by suggesting special project initiation and using my voice more often to share my thoughts and suggestions within our meetings and amongst my divisions back in my area of work. And this is the alignment between RESERT, the racial equity team at a governance level, and the action work happening. And this is from a staff member who has never once presented to this county board before and been in here. And she sent me this email unprompted, and now it's getting read out loud. But it gets to the point of how we need to empower leadership at all levels. And I just want to highlight that and finish by saying, and the racial equity, the third health and racial equity administrator position, which we paused at the beginning of COVID, but have decided to move forward with because of the importance of all the work we've been talking about these last number of weeks, is currently in the process right before interviews right now. So we are moving toward actually continuing to add capacity to this, even in the current time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And I just wanted, before we move on, I don't see any other questions to John, because I'm excited to hear his presentation. I also want to thank you for calling out improving the RBA process and moving beyond stating the disparity and digging into the history behind the problem and how our systems may have contributed to those disparities and the role we've played as a government structure in perpetuating systemic racism, and how whatever new model we're implementing is seeking to make an impact in the other direction, and what our expectations are for that. I think that is so critical towards reconciliation, is owning our role in moving forward. So thank you for that and all of your work and this presentation. And we are ready for John Clavin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'd like to turn it over to Director Clavins.
Good morning again, everybody. I'm John Clavins, Director of Community Corrections. And Madam Chair, Commissioners, Ryan, Karen, thank you for the time to get a chance to talk about our justice reform work that has been in progress really for a number of years now. And in particular, I'm going to highlight 5 areas, all of which are about advancing racial and health equity and community engagement. And thank you, Sarah, for your help. I know the town hall that we had was tremendously helpful for all of our corrections staff that were on and for our communities to engage with each other and to learn about the work that we're doing. I'm going to start off by just saying, wow, what a difference a year makes. When you think back, it was a year ago next week that we were actually closing Boys Totem Town. And so all of the commissioners I know were present. Ryan, we had a huge 200 people packed into a very tight space over at BTT. And I couldn't even imagine going through that this year, obviously, with the COVID crisis we've been under. So in some ways, I'm thankful that we were able to accomplish that goal last year, to make sure that we could engage with our community members, celebrate the great work of our staff at BTT and all the incredible things they've done for decades across the way. So I just want to kind of reflect on that a little bit, to think last August it was a whole different story. So for the justice reform areas that we'll talk about today, Boys Totem Town closure, commissioners, you know that we were scheduled actually to do a workshop with you back on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, and that's when COVID hit. And so I think we were the first workshop that actually got canceled because of the crisis that had hit us at that point in time. And I know that we did provide, my staff did provide a PowerPoint presentation to the board, so there is some background information. And I'll just touch on that a little bit today, and certainly we'll entertain any questions that you have about the closure of BTT and kind of what happened to the resources and the work that we're doing today. Fee elimination also is a huge part of the reform work we've been doing. April 14th, I appreciate the support from the board. We actually eliminated our supervision fees in most areas across the department, and some fees out at the RCCF as well. And again, I thank you for your support in that work. Pretrial services, that's another huge part of the work we're doing. That's the front end work. Pretrial and diversion, we're working together with John Choi's office at the county attorney's office to come up with some contracting to really strengthen our pretrial services and our diversion services for the adults. That board, that contract approval actually I think is August 11th. It's not the 4th, so just letting you know it's back about a week. We had some details we had to still work out in the final contract negotiations. Revocations, commissioners, you know we've been working on trying to reduce revocations. The significant impacts of people going back to prison. In fact, the prison population, generally speaking, about 60% of prison returnees are revocations, which are violations usually of conditions of probation. And so we are looking deeply into that subject area in particular, working with the RENA Institute to try to resolve some of those issues and to try to come up with better strategies to avoid revocation whenever we can. And last but not least, true to my heart is the cognitive behavioral work that we're working on. I've talked to, I think, most of the commissioners about this work, and of course we had Cordell Nichols here today that highlighted some of the great work that he's doing as one of our fantastic COG facilitators at Community Corrections. So I'll start off with a quick review related to Boys Totem Town closure. As you all know, we've been working on reform work in the juvenile justice area for many, many years. A big thanks to Commissioner Carter and some of the work that was initiated way before John Clavin started at Ramsey County back in 2005. We saw over the course of a number of years significant reductions in our out-of-home placement numbers, particularly at the JDC. And the reform work there has been supported by the community in so many different ways and supported by all of you as commissioners. That work led into the deep end work that in 2015 we started with the Annie E. Casey Foundation, which really focused on the long-term placements of youth in residential facilities. And Totem Town was kind of part of that whole process as well, looking at our local facilities, other facilities, out-of-state placements, the whole picture as far as what we could do to reduce those placements. I'm proud to say that today, we still have under 30 youth in placement. In fact, I looked at the numbers today. We're at 26 youth in out-of-home placement, which is a much smaller number than we had 5 years ago when we were looking at 130 or more youth in out-of-home placement. And if you go back 10 years ago, it's in the hundreds, multiple hundreds. We have nobody in out-of-home placement that's in out-of-state placement right now in community corrections too. So again, we're trying to keep as local as we can when we do have to, when the court does initiate or order a placement. The cost savings also continues to be positive as far as alternatives in the community versus residential programs. Many of you know the cost, whether it was at Boys Totem Town or in other residential placements, was several $100s to hundreds of dollars per day. And so community-based services really are more effective, more cost-effective, and really engage our families in a more positive way. Some of the dollars that we've reallocated after the closure of BTT have also gone to support the Transforming Systems Together work, and we're looking at expanding again with that group, particularly around the adult reform area, trying to coordinate those services throughout corrections and throughout the justice system. Going back to BTT, our budget that we had allocated for the 2020 and 2021 included around 45 positions that were part of the BTT staff. And I'm proud to say again that all of the staff that were looking for different jobs, looking for different opportunities were reallocated, many into community corrections, different parts of the department, also some to other departments in the county as well. We had around 12 FTEs that were reallocated to the JDC to shore up our resources at JDC, not just custody resources, but also services for our youth, mental health interventions. We even do some COG programming at the JDC, which we had a difficult time doing a couple of years ago, and trying to make sure staffing is available 24/7. We also took on booking responsibilities. You might remember last year that we transferred the juvenile booking process from the LAC, from the Sheriff's Office, into community corrections. That was to maintain a much better process for the youth, the families, safety. It was also to comply with federal requirements to make sure that we're PREA compliant in our correctional facilities as well. That did require additional staffing, and again, thanks to the closure of BTT, we were able to staff that particular area as well. We had 13 FTEs that transferred into the adult probation work, and you heard today at least one of our staff members who is here, Seth. He is now working in our community homelessness and family stability unit. So we have agents that are actually going out in the community, and we've had some out in the community even during the COVID situation, helping to feed people, helping to meet with them, make sure that they're complying with any conditions that they have to comply with, and again, avoiding potential revocations or violations of probation. We've also started the community monitoring program with some of those staff members. That's an alternative to the RCCF placement. So we can actually avoid sentences at the RCCF, which has helped us reduce the number of clients that we've had there, and particularly under the COVID crisis situation. So those staff, again, from BTT have been essential. We've reallocated 3 FTEs to community COG agents, again, Cordell being one of those that you met this morning, providing services in the cognitive skills, cognitive behavioral area. Virtually, we've gone to a lot of COG sessions. We've done over 500 sessions with clients during the course of the COVID situation here. Group sessions, individual sessions as well, practicing skills and helping them readjust into the community. We also have, we had 1 FTE transferred from a mental health professional position that was at BTT that went to the RCCF. We also provided an FTE to Maria Weatherall's department for Veteran Services to help with community outreach, which I know Maria was very happy about that. I appreciate that, Maria. And we also had some unique transfers. Our chief engineer, who was at BTT, actually transferred to the courthouse right here and is providing services with property management. I know I've run into him a couple of times in the hallway in the past, and he seems very happy with his position there as well. Several of our positions also went over to social services, one in particular, an admin assistant that just could not be with Keith Latimer very long, our former superintendent. So she's working with Keith and providing support to Keith, who did a fantastic job for us in community corrections, and I'd love to steal him back someday. We also have funds that are allocated for some of the ongoing maintenance at BTT, or at the BTT site. It's obviously not the Boys Totem Town program anymore, but Corrections does allocate about $10,000 a month to help cover some of the expenses for maintenance as well. So that is part of our reallocation of the budget. So in the end, we again have seen everybody hasn't had an opportunity to find a position someplace and maintain solid employment. We are also setting aside an FTE for Sarah Holly for racial equity work to assist her work and the entire service team as well. And we've still got about 13 FTE positions that are vacant. And so those positions are going to help us reallocate dollars to cover particularly some of the fee eliminations that we went through, which is my second topic that I'll cover here in a second. And I just wanted to, again, give you a quick overview. If you go back to the PowerPoint slides, again, back from March, there's some more details in there as well as far as how things look going forward. My second topic is fee eliminations, and again, thank you to the board for your support in that process. On April 14th, we eliminated a good portion of the fees that we charge at community corrections. I'm proud to say, too, this past week, there's an annual report that comes out with all the metro counties that actually lists probation and supervision fees in the metro area. We are at 0. Nobody else is even close. And in fact, some departments have continued to increase those fees on a percentage basis, even under the COVID situation. So I was very proud of the department, very proud of our county to take that initiative, and for us to be listed in that particular fashion on that Metro-wide report. The cost of those fees, again, totals close to $1 million in revenue. So we've been working hard as a department, again, to help with reallocating and covering those revenue expenses. Some of this started back in 2019, carried through 2020, and obviously we'll continue on with our budget cycle as we go forward. After the elimination, we received a lot of positive comments. There were community members that called me personally, left messages, contacted our staff. In fact, when we sent a broad message out to all of our adults on probation, there was concern that there was a new crisis or that there was some problem happening. But really the message was to let people know the fees have been eliminated and we will no longer be charging a fee. And if a fee is in process, we're actually going to even refund people as well. The Marshall Project called to check in with us on how we proceeded with that. The Annie A. Casey Foundation also contacted us about that change. EXIT, which is a national probation reform group, also contacted us because this, again, is part of reform work that some other counties are looking at across the county, as well as the American Probation and Parole Association. So we know through various national reports, fees have disparate impacts on many of our clients, and it's a significant challenge for people to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of fees. So this, again, has really been, I think, tremendously helpful for the many, many people that we supervise, particularly with the economic challenges we see today. And we are nowhere near and weren't anywhere near some of the fees that other departments have been charging. I want to thank Scott Williams, Deputy County Manager of Safety and Justice, for his work in this area. Jennifer Schuster-Jaeger, she was a tremendous asset in our department and in this work in particular. County Finance, as we worked with a justice assistant or a grant from the PRM group to help in conjunction with the work going on in the Burns Institute. So again, a significant portion of this work has helped many of those folks that we supervise. I'm hopeful that our changes will be a catalyst for other parts of the justice system to consider reductions or eliminations in fees, including the courts, obviously the prosecutors' offices, law enforcement, other legal fees that people are charged. And so I'm hoping, again, we're setting a path in a real positive way for others to take a look at those particular challenges. My third topic is pretrial services. And again, we'll have a much more detailed contract coming up before the board on August 11th. And as you know, this has been a process we've been working on for multiple years now. Actually had a technical assistance grants from the NIC, National Institute of Corrections, back in 2017. They came in on site, interviewed a number of people in the justice system, and really took an in-depth look at our pretrial services and the diversion work that we were doing here in the county. Their assessment found that there were some areas that were lacking that we needed to really try to beef up. One of those was data reporting, analysis, racial equity breakouts, information around outcomes with pretrial services as well, and with diversion. And taking a look at that, we also looked at the jail population numbers. And with strategic interventions, better assessments at the front end, different things that we can do in the pretrial area, we can actually hopefully lower the population at the LEC as well. And so that's one of our targeted outcomes in reviewing and re-upping this pretrial contract. There are some additional costs we'll be working through as we reestablish those services with a new vendor. We've been working very closely with John Choi's office as their responsibility is the diversion side of things, and I know the county attorney has been very vocal about trying to expand adult diversion, doubling or even maybe tripling the number of people that have access to those services. And again, we're very supportive of that work in community corrections. It also overlaps into the city prosecutors' offices that we're trying to support that diversion is available across the county, well, not just with the county attorney's office, but with city prosecutors as well. So that contract, again, will be before you on August 11th, and look forward to any conversations or anything you'd like to talk about before that comes forward, and we're hoping for your support. Revocation reductions, again, many of you know we've been looking at that area in particular, and I actually just got a message the other day from Kelly Mitchell, who's the head of the Statewide Sentencing Guidelines Commission, but is also a professor at the Rabina Institute at the University of Minnesota Law School. And we have a revocations challenge grant that Rabina received about a little less than a year ago. And so we started initial meetings last fall going into the spring Of course, when COVID hit, those meetings were delayed, but we are going to re-up again, even virtual meetings to talk with community members, justice system players across the board to look at revocations. What are the driving factors? What are the things that really end up putting someone in a revocation situation? We already know from the data that many of those that are in a revocation situation tend to be younger African-American men, 18 to 25 particularly. So I can tell you right now that's an area that we're looking at very closely for service enhancements. That's why we're looking at this homelessness and community support stability unit as well. It's also another reason why we shifted away from our gang unit work and decided to go with a more robust plan with more interventions for higher risk clients as well. But revocations is a driving force for incarceration. And again, we're going to try to do whatever we can at the front end to try to reduce those when we can with public safety in mind. Rabina actually has gathered a lot of data already. I think they're still looking to interview some clients. They're still looking to interview some of the judges as well in that work in particular. And as Sarah Holly is still in the room, I'm going to tap into her resources and hope that we can maybe have another community forum or another town hall meeting to talk about revocations with community as well, to get more input from community members about that work as well. We've got community members on the advisory panel, but I'd like to get more details and more information if we can, hopefully before the end of summer or early this fall. We've also, talked about what can change as we go forward. So many of you may know too that there was a report from the statewide sentencing guidelines that outlined our revocation rate in Ramsey County was around 22%. And that was about twice the level that we saw across the river with the other county on the other side of the river. And again, we're trying to reduce those numbers. And I'm happy to say that we have seen some slight downturn in that number. So we're down to maybe 20% or a little bit under that. But we need to do better. This is an area of reform that we want to take a real serious look at. It involves a lot of hard work with our staff, with the judges, with all of those folks in the justice system, and also with our community members as well. There's significant work that we can do to hopefully reduce the number of revocations that we see. We're also working with Commissioner Schnell at the Department of Corrections to take a look at potential revocation resources that we could work with at the DOC level. In fact, before COVID hit, we were getting close to some negotiations and potentially maybe even a contract with the DOC to help provide local services in lieu of someone going into the prison system. And so we're hoping to continue some of that work. Obviously, things have changed significantly for us and also for the Department of Corrections, but it is an area that we will continue to push forward on and continue to try to do some great work on. The fifth topic area is our cognitive behavioral interventions. And as many of you know, this is a significant part of the work that we do in community corrections. We have a number of staff that are trained. And even under COVID, we've continued to train staff. In fact, my training unit staff have actually helped to train other departments in the metro area to help them beef up some of their COG resources, particularly doing virtual COG sessions. By example, we have a program called Decision Points, which was written by a national author out on the East Coast. That author has actually come in to help us provide this virtual format, has actually supported us, and has actually given us tremendous compliments for the work we're doing. So in many ways, this work on that Decision Points model is becoming a model for across the country with many other departments that are looking at doing a very similar approach under the COVID situation as well. We have staff that are trained, as I said earlier, at the RCCF and at JDC. So in our facilities, in our communities, we again are providing those services. The primary training we do is problem solving, anger management, emotions control, assertiveness training, enhancing communication skills. And again, these are critical factors, particularly with the high-risk clients that we work with that tend to be more impulsive, act before they think, end up in trouble, and potentially deeper and deeper into the justice system. Again, that COG work will continue, and in fact, it may be a great topic for a future workshop. Our training coordinator, Carly Jorgensen, has done tremendous work in this area, and we'd love to have an opportunity to run you through a COG session, potentially, maybe virtually, as a group, and just to get an experience for what it feels like to go through that particular type of work. And I want to emphasize in all of these areas, it's our staff that have done tremendous work here. We have gone through a ton of changes. I mean, everybody has, and particularly in the justice system, when you think of what's happened over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, with the COVID situation, the death of George Floyd, community unrest that has really focused a lot of attention on the justice system. we are a part of that, and we feel that, and my staff feel that. So we have gone out to try to support our staff. We have staff that are concerned about, the future of their jobs and how does, what happens with the criminal justice system when there's a lot of reforms going on, and we hear of defunding of the police departments, all those kind of things. So my staff have a lot of questions, and I can rest assure you we're working hard to try to provide them with a lot of support. We've offered listening sessions. We brought in outside facilitators. Management has spent time talking with leaders across the department to make sure that they feel supported and that they know we are going to continue to push forward on this particular reform path, which is the right thing to do. It's the just thing to do. It's what we have to do to provide hope to all those folks that we serve. I'm going to stop there and see if there are questions in particular about one or any of those particular topics. So, Commissioner Fretham, I'll turn it back to you for anything that you might want to ask.
Thank you, Director Clavens. It looks like we do have a few questions. I'll start with Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Madam Chair. John, I want to go back to the revocations conversation and information you shared with us. And you shared that, our revocation was double, which Hennepin County's was. And you talked about really wanting to reduce that. But to reduce it, we have to have an understanding of why we're so high. And you didn't talk about the why. Could you talk about the why a little bit so we could all have an understanding of why we have such a huge number disparity, especially when we're comparing it to Hennepin County?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner McDonough, thank you for that question. This is precisely the question we're trying to tackle right now with the Rabina Institute. The work we're doing with them is taking a deeper dive into all the decision points that go around a revocation decision. So again, ultimately the decision comes from the bench, from the judge, but we know that there are a lot of factors that happen before that, including the probation department. Our staff supervise clients. They look at how to address potential violations or if someone's not complying with their conditions of probation. We've already started to make some adjustments actually to address those decision areas. One of the alternatives that we're looking at right now, Commissioner, is the possibility of implementing an approach known as sanctions conferencing, which I don't particularly like the name, but that's a statutory authorization that the probation department has to address a potential violation without actually going into the courtroom. Ultimately, the approval comes from the bench or comes from the judges, but we're looking at why it is that we can, why do we have to go back to a correctional facility when we can potentially either shorten the sentence or eliminate it altogether and provide alternatives, whether that's electronic home monitoring, other conditions of probation that can be restructured or revamped, or maybe it's a mental health intervention that's necessary, but we're looking at those factors. So the answer to your question is yet to come with very specific details as we work with the Rabina Institute. We just know that there's a lot of decision points. Prosecutors, probation officers, law enforcement, not as much, but usually it's more in the justice system. And then ultimately, when it gets to the bench, the judges have to decide, what am I going to do about this particular client and what's the best response based on their needs and on their risk level as well. So I hope that gives you some insight into what we're looking at.
Madam Chair, if I could have a follow-up, please. And I know you're on a tight timeline, but this is really a big deal here, I think, especially in the reform work we're doing. Do we have a timeline on the work with the Rabina Institute on how quickly we might start getting to some of those whys? And then how are we getting the bench, bringing them along from the beginning rather than, at some point we're going to have to go to them? Are they included in this study? Are they a part of those conversations because of the decision making at the end that really can have a big impact on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McDonough. I'll start on the back side of your question that yes, the judges are involved. We actually have a sitting judge who's on the advisory council on the committee, reports back to the chief judge. We are planning, Rabina, I should say, is planning to interview some judges to talk about the decision points that they make and what the input is there. And I think they're down to like those last couple interviews with the bench and also trying to facilitate interviews with clients, which we were hoping to do out in the community until COVID hit. And now, again, we're looking at doing probably virtual types of interviews. So yes, the bench is involved and we definitely need to have them along the way. And I know that there's been quite a bit of discussion around this whole area of revocations. whether or not someone gets a break at the front end so that we come down harder on them later at the back end of that, and trying to really take a look at what's the best decision for that client as well. And I can tell you that, the concern, at least from a corrections professional standpoint, the concern I have is oftentimes when someone is sent back to prison, and you'll hear this from the Commissioner of Corrections pretty cleanly too, is that if you go back for 90 or 120 days, there's not a whole lot of services there. It really is what they call kind of a warehousing situation. So people go back, which disrupts their employment, their family situation, their financial situation. A lot of things happen so that it actually creates more trouble when they return after a revocation. And again, what I'm talking about is technical violations of probation. These aren't people committing new heinous crimes or anything like that. These are people that maybe didn't complete a program, didn't comply with a particular condition. And our probation officers are well trained. We're not pulling a revocation. We're not pulling someone in because they missed an office appointment or something minor like that, because that does come up periodically. It's really times when people have had 2, 3, 4 things that have come up. Maybe it's failed drug testing, those kind of things that we're trying to tackle and address those issues as well. So it is critical, and the bench definitely is part and has to be part of this work as well. Your first question, I think, was on the timeline piece of this. And so according to Robina, what Kelly Mitchell would like to do is try to bring our group back again here probably in August for further discussions, probably in a virtual format. They're hoping to formulate recommendations they can provide to us probably in October, so we can actually set something up and maybe be ready to move by the end of this year or very early next year in any changes in what we're going to do with the revocation process. We also have a committee with the bench, the Community Corrections Courts Committee. This topic has come up there as well as far as looking at alternatives and interventions. And so Judge Harris is the person that chairs that particular group. And so we're working closely with him and with the criminal court judges on this topic, along with a number of other areas as well. So I hope that answers your question, Commissioner.
Great. I'm going to go to Commissioner McGuire next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, wow, what a year you have had. We've all had Director Clavens, and I just know that you've been experiencing so much in your department. So, Madam Chair, Commissioner McDonough actually asked my first question. So I had a question about revocations, and I have a number of number of updates, but I'm going to just support a workshop on this. I would love to have a workshop on the COG work that we're doing, and I am curious about more information on the pretrial services and just what we are doing with our families of our residents that ended up that are not at Boys Totem Town now. What kind of services are we providing to them so that they don't have to be in a residential place? I would just like more in depth on that. So I'm just going to save us some time now, Madam Chair, and just look forward to a workshop when we can get more in depth about all the really great community work. I just have heard, some people say, well, yeah, you closed Boys Totem Town and then crime went up. I said, I'm sure that's not the reason. And I just want to dispel some of those myths that might be out there. So I just hope that we can have further workshops on that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, I'll take that last piece first. Unless every other community across the country also closed down a Boys Totem Town at the same time we did, I out of hand reject that question on the premise by which it was asked. And I just want to get that out and on the record today. What I would, 2 things on that. You did approve within the last 12 months the opening of 2 new African-American specific culturally based community services that keep young people in the community being served in community-based settings. That's 2 of many options along a much broader continuum, and I won't go into all that detail today. We can follow up with some of that. Yes to the workshop topics. I wanted to briefly mention the pretrial diversion. So August 11th, we will do a dive on that, assuming the board would like to pull that item and have that conversation that day, and I imagine that we'll be prepared to do that. In short, this has been a collective effort between the bench, the county attorney's office, community corrections, community partners, and is leading to an exciting moment where we're no longer looking just at deep end reform or just at detention reform, but now looking at pretrial services work as well. And this continues to expand where that leading reform work is moving into new spaces and new areas. It's an expensive piece of work. I mean, it's intensive in terms of services and the investment being made by the county or being proposed to all of you. but the payback is in this. You also see better results, and you see fewer people being incarcerated, which is a significant cost to society in a different part of a ledger that simply hasn't worked well in the past. So a lot more to come on that. We'll be ready to share a lot on August 11th. I just want to comment on that BTT piece that I just think if you look at data around the country, you cannot link the closure of our juvenile detention or of that residential treatment site to what's been going on around us.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that, and that was what I was expecting.
And if I can add just real quick, Commissioner and Ryan, we also have other initiatives. If Kim Stubblefield was here, our Director of Juvenile Probation, she could go on for a long time to talk about family engaged case planning that we're doing with the Annie Casey Foundation, supporting families, supporting the youth that we serve, whether they're, at the JDC or on probation or potentially in a diversion situation. So there has been a lot of work done that emphasizes community-based approaches, working with families, trying to, again, avoid any deep-end interventions, like Ryan said, that ultimately become costly. And at the end of the day, they haven't been very successful. A lot of youth come back and they don't necessarily adjust back positively into the community. So we are going to continue to focus on those areas, rest assured, for years to come. And we have put a lot of resources into that work as well. And again, that could be part of that future workshop with family engaged case planning. I know Kim has presented at a national conference, the JDI conference, I think last fall in Seattle. So she's got a great PowerPoint presentation on that work going forward. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. We've got one more question with Commissioner Carter, and I'd like to get to that so that we still have time to get to the child welfare reset topic before wrapping up for today and moving the rest of our topics to the August 11th meeting. So thank you, Commissioner Carter.
Thank you for the reminder to keep it very short. And so I won't ask a question, I'll save mine as well, but I do want to just emphasize that the work that you've been talking about, that we've all been talking about and sharing today, is the work of an incredible and committed staff. And I just like to give comfort that as we've seen the transformation occurring over the years, and that continues to occur now with our community and systems partners and with national partners as well, we know that that is the staff that has brought this work about and that has been willing to take on the new work and transform and retrain and really challenge themselves to move the work forward that needs to be done for our community's health and well-being and safety. And just to thank you for that, and assurances as our staff is willing to see that work and to transform into that work, that we care about them, we support them, and they should feel gratitude, or they should feel gratified that this is work that they have brought about on behalf of all of us. Thank you so much for the highlights today.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. I appreciate that tremendously. And you're right. It's a lot of hard work. It's shifting gears in many ways. It's doing things differently. That has not always been easy for all of our staff. It's a challenge. And we have emphasized that even when things aren't working or we shift away from one approach or another, it doesn't mean that we had people doing bad things or that they were intentionally doing something wrong. But when the research bears out a need for a change and a different path going forward, I really feel it's our obligation to make those changes and make those moves and really protect the resources of the county and the residents of Ramsey County, and to really serve our youth and our families in the most positive, productive, hopefully successful way we can. So I really appreciate your feedback, and you're right. Without the tremendously dedicated staff we have, this would be a much greater struggle.
Thank you so much, Director Clavens. And with that, I think we are ready for Ann Berry.
Welcome, Ann Berry.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, and County Manager Ryan O'Connor, I am Ann Berry, and I'm the Director of Ramsey County Social Services. And today I'm going to be talking about the Child Welfare Reset, which is the next, if you want to move to the next slide. A couple of thoughts about this. We're calling this, I'm not crazy about calling it a, thank you. Probably could have done that myself. So a couple of things. We're using the words child welfare reset. I'm not talking about child protection. I'm talking about child well-being, their health and their well-being within family units. And the second is to get us started on a path of thinking about when and how children are at their safest. And they are safe when they are with people they love and people they know. This is an enormous shift. It took our society a long time to begin to understand just the devastation that came from incarceration, particularly among Black and Brown communities and the American Indian community. As a society, we have not reached that reckoning when it comes to child welfare and child protection. We're just not there yet. But we do know the devastating impacts that come to families and to children when they are forcibly removed, right? When they're separated from one another. And until we shift the narrative about what is safe for children and what is child protection, we will continue to devastate families. We will continue to separate children from people who love them, know them, and can be a part of their healthy development. Does that mean all families are perfect? No. It means that our job is different today than it was even yesterday or months before, which is we would displace children. We would put them in foster care. We again, separate them rather than thinking about how we support and make the family whole and give them what they need when they need it. So this is a large shift, not just for Ramsey County, but for all of society. There'll be lots of pushback, and we just need to work closely with one another as we work with every single family who gets reported to us in our child welfare and in our child protection programs. I also, like many governmental systems, this was a system that was created out of good intentions, right? Many were. And we have to think about digging into what those intentions really mean and again, be in a place where we can understand what happens to a child when they are separated from their family. So lots of change that'll take place. I'm going to talk about 3 areas that we're doing work in: the area of diversion, culturally specific services, and then the African American Family Preservation Act. When I think about change, I always talked about change both outside, inside. It's a theory of change, a framework for change. So when we think about change in child welfare, so we move to one about health and well-being of children and their families, we're going to need some legislative changes. Right now, when we think about families and we think about the importance of families, it is not just the immediate family, it's often extended family. One of the issues we have in when we do some safety planning for families is that not all family members are available to provide care legally. They're there and available to provide services and care, but they might have something in their background that would prevent them from being a caregiver today. We're going to need to work with the legislature on making a number of those changes. On the inside, when we think about changes that we're making internally, well, the first item on the list is one of the places where we're making some changes. It started out as a diversion team, a 24/7 co-responding team with law enforcement, but the concept has gotten bigger as we work more closely with community, and it helps us reshift, the way we think about child welfare. So at its origins, it's 24/7 co-responding with law enforcement. Minnesota, I'll remind you this of a couple times, is one of the last states in the country that allows law enforcement to be the removing party. It is usually child welfare that does the removal. In Minnesota, it's still law enforcement. We are co-responding with law enforcement now so that on a 24/7 basis so that we can prevent removal. We're working first with St. Paul Police, and we'll move to working with all the city police departments and the sheriff as well. But for right now, most of our calls do come from St. Paul. And this is something the St. Paul Police, we're grateful. We began this discussion about a year ago with them, and we're working on protocols with them, but they were grateful. They didn't want to be in the position of removing children if they didn't need to be removed from their families. So this is, we've done this work in concert with families who have been impacted by the child welfare system and child protection system, and with community who have said to us for a long time, you need to stop taking apart our families. How this proposal has grown includes some work in the area of early intervention. So we have grant funds from the Department of Human Services for Parent Support Outreach Program, for, I could go through a long list, children's mental health. We get lots of resources from the Department of Human Services that come through the Medicaid program, but we've never actually effectively put them all together and said, here's how we can support families earlier in this process. So we are using every resource available to us to provide upstream intervention. Another thing that you're going to see and hear a lot about is mapping with families. I'll talk about two different kinds of mapping, but the mapping I'm talking about right now is what we call safety planning. And what we do is we sit with family members of the county attorney's office, social workers, community members. We want to add public health as soon as, it might be a year from now, but as soon as they're available to join us, because they too are a really precious resource to this work. And what we do, I was just looking at one that we did yesterday. We spend hours working on options to support the family so that they can all be safe and they can be so that they can be healthy, and that we're looking out for the well-being. What I want to highlight about what we're doing is that we are including community members as a part of safety planning with us, so that they can see what we can't see when we're deeply engaged in systems. And then the last thing we're doing is what I'd call broader systems mapping, so that in fact we know how children come into the child welfare, child protection system. They come from schools, hospitals, and law enforcement. Well, we're working on the law enforcement front. The next thing is spending time working with hospitals. Many of our reports, it came as a surprise to me, come from hospitals. And as simple as cases of children who have been hospitalized and the hospital isn't able to reach a parent, and now a child is in the child protection system, which they shouldn't be, right? So we need to work with schools, with hospitals, the same way we're working with law enforcement, which is we co-respond. And we stop families from getting into the child protection system earlier in the process. Let me move on then to a discussion about culturally specific services. Ryan already mentioned some of those that we did in partnership with corrections and social services when talking about young men, particularly who are in the juvenile justice system, young Black men who are in the system. We worked to very deliberately, and I like Sarah's word, intentionally, actually. It's able to be intentional, right? That, in fact, we spent almost a year and a half trying to move this contract to provide services in a culturally specific manner. But we did it, and I think it paved the way for future contracts and future services. So we are very deliberately adding culturally specific services in the child welfare area. They're being built by community and with families, people who have not been a part of our system or service delivery system prior to all of this work. I also want to thank both Lerone Greer and Sarah Holly for their work with the Cultural Wellness Center, and again, an outside strategy that brings us connections to community and reminds us of that we're not decision makers for families. They are, but we can support them. The last thing I'll talk about then is the African American Family Preservation Act. Again, if we think about that inside-outside strategy for change, we're going to need law changes. And the African American Preservation Act is something that we've been actively working on, and I want to thank Melissa Finnegan, even though she's now attending to her twins with her husband. She was very helpful for the last number of months in having us work with the community on what should be included in the African American Family Preservation Act. Our bottom line has been we need to remove law enforcement from the removal process. We need to change the standard I don't want to get too deep into the child protection system, but right now we are required to make reasonable efforts to keep children with their families. We would like to move that to what is a higher bar or a higher requirement, which is active efforts. It's what's required in the Indian Child Welfare Act. We also want to rethink maltreatment determinations, what happens the moment a child is in the system, whether their maltreatment occurred or not. That maltreatment finding stays with the family, and it becomes a barrier to work. It becomes a barrier to getting your license, whether it's in social work or in healthcare. And then the final area where we know we have to see some changes is in the area of appeals. A child can be removed from a family, and a family maybe that happens at school, for example. A child goes to school, the child is removed. It's not happening right now, but it's had certainly in the past. And parent doesn't know anything. And if you, as a parent, you can imagine the panic and concern that comes when a child is removed and there's no notice and there's really no appeal requirements in statute, which is unusual for public programs. So it's another thing that I think we need to push for and change. What can we do inside? Well, what we're doing is we're working with at least 5 members of the African American and American Indian community, all of whom have been impacted by our child welfare and child protection system. And they are working with us on not only looking at the legislation itself, but what practice changes we can make. So it's staff alongside community who are thinking about the practice changes that we can make in child protection. I also want to mention some work that we're doing with community corrections. We have a number of children that cross over in both of our systems, both in child protection and in the juvenile justice system, and they sometimes move between the two, or jurisdiction falls to both John Clavin's area and mine. We are looking at a number of different options for how we can either specialize our services or specialized teams, certainly creating multiple disciplinary teams so that we work across our programs and we work in alignment with one another. Those are the things that we are doing. Hopefully I didn't take up too much time, and I'm available for questions before we move on.
Thank you, Anne. I'll start with Commissioner Mattis-Castillo, who has your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Anne, for your awesome work in this really important area of child welfare, and really getting to making sure our families are healthy and connected and resourced well. I just had a question about child protection and housing. We know a lot of times when people are in unstable housing, they're having to make hard choices, whether they're living outside or in their car. And there's a big fear among people who are experiencing homelessness about losing their children. And we have our own hotel program that we don't allow families who have an open child protection case to access that program. So what kind of work internally can we do to help with the housing situation and that children aren't being taken because of unstable housing?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, great question. We actually have money set aside. This is the short-term response, which is we have money set aside that we use to provide shelter for families who are unsheltered. So we too can provide hotel space and do. It's not uncommon late on a Friday afternoon or over the weekend that we use vouchers and provide shelter for families who have needs. That's not the long-term response, that's the short-term response. The longer-term response is the work that's happening at the housing level, which is the creation of more affordable housing. The other thing that we are doing specifically in social services is the development of what I would call specialized housing. So housing for families where substance abuse might be an issue, but we want to keep the family together while we're treating substance abuse. The same is true with mental health services. So we're looking at some culturally specific specialized housing because you're right, courts will not allow children to return to their families unless there's stable housing. So whatever we do to create more affordable housing, whatever we do to create additional specialized services will all help us in the mid and long term. And in the short term, we can provide a roof using a hotel. Again, it's not the long-term solution, but we can provide shelter for families in the child protection system.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So if someone has an open child protection case, they can access that program? Is that what you're saying?
Madam Chair and Commissioner, yes.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, I see Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Barry. Oh my gosh, this is amazing work. And you said it at the beginning. This is really systemic change, and it's really changing culture, changing people's minds about how we work with our families and our children. So thank you so much for that. I just support everything you're doing and look forward to continuing to hear about all of that good work. I know that you're also really sensitive and cognizant of the toll that all of this hard work takes on our staff. And we know that we have amazing staff throughout all of Ramsey County. And I know especially in social services, we're asking staff to do, all this amazing work to change some of the work they're doing, and then to make these tough decisions. So if you would just comment, I know that you've had some programs that you've made available to staff to really help them with this work. And I want to just give you a shout out about that. And if you wanted to comment on any of that, but I just appreciate so much that, our families do better when our staff can do better and help them. So I just wanted to acknowledge that the work that I think you're doing to really help with that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'd also give a shout out to Maria Sarabia in DIOD, who is now partnering up with us, because the wellness of our staff extends far beyond just social workers who day to day find themselves in a position to separate families. I mean, I think this has a benefit to all of our staff. So we've been working with Maria on how we can do this on a more countywide basis. And again, the work we're doing with the Cultural Wellness Center and the wellness, particularly of not just our African American staff, but again, if we're leading with race and we're thinking about who is in the child protection system and the impact it has on our staff, our African American staff and our American Indian staff in child welfare. Yeah, so we're taking multiple approaches to this. So thank you for recognizing that.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So I see Commissioner Reinhardt's hand raised, Commissioner Manis-Castillo, and if you still have another question, I will get to you after Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, one of the things, there were a lot of things that you talked about that really struck me as, oh my gosh, what do we need to do and how quickly can we do it? But especially the legislative fixes that are needed to clear someone's record. You're right. It has an impact on housing and work and everything, especially if it's something that, was corrected. There was, there could be all kinds of reasons why something would happen. But to not have the flexibility of figuring out a method by which it could be dealt with without having a criminal record, I think would be very, very helpful to these families. But I do think that just as with other legislative issues that we bring forward, that we have to have something that's comprehensive in this area so that we're not bringing just one piece at a time, but rather trying to come up with, well, what is it that we need to have this child welfare reset, especially in regards to legislation, whether it's about detaining or keeping something on someone's record or other parts of this that just are not really workable. They may sound good on paper, or maybe they don't, I don't know. But the actual implementation is something that is very, very difficult to do. So I think that, we'll get through, special sessions, and then next year we really need to take a lot of the learnings that we've had in this area and in others to the legislature to say, these are the things that we need to do if we want to get to something that's better than the past normal. So I appreciate all the work here, and I had another question and now I can't remember what it was. But anyhow, if I think of it, I'll just send it on. Thank you so much for this work and moving us forward. families staying together, safely staying together, is something that's incredibly important. We've learned that. I think that's been a lesson learned for quite some time, but it didn't seem like there was much implementation to try to change the trajectory from what we had done in the past. So this change is so welcome and so refreshing. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised, so Anne, I'll make my statement slash question regarding the sources of reporting that you get in terms of schools and hospitals. And I guess my assumption would be a lot of that is tied to mandated reporter laws. As a former mandated reporter in childcare, I am really excited about any efforts to try to come up with new models, because as someone who would often get into a situation that I felt required a report as a mandated reporter, but also knowing if I report this, feeling like I don't think this child should be taken away from their parents, but knowing that if I report this and the result is the police show up and question this parent, that's going to be traumatic for everyone. It's going to ruin my relationship with this parent. It could very likely lead to a transition for this child, which is really harmful, either away from their parent, which is incredibly traumatic, or out of my facility, which isn't nearly as traumatic, but it's also a hard transition for kids and hard for a working parent to try to find new childcare. Having a model that is much more supportive and allows people who are required to make reports if there is any concern of harm to a child, but to do so in a way that maintains relationships all around and offers support to families that might need some support would be much desired, at least from my perspective in that role. So I applaud that for sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will add childcare to the list.
Thank you.
as well. Interestingly enough, we don't get as many reports as we do from schools, but we do. We do get reports from childcare as well. So I really do appreciate that suggestion and better ways we can partner. So the bad results don't come from you taking your responsibility as a mandated reporter and doing what the law tells you to do. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and I think in terms of as childcare providers are mandated reporters, I think a struggle potentially for some childcare providers is, it is a tight margin. A lot of childcare providers are for profit, and a lot of them might know that if I report, this family is going to leave, and can I take that financial hit? So that's problematic on a whole other level. And so not wanting to throw that into the mix for people. Support all the way around is the way to go, and in a way that maintains relationships, especially when it comes to something child-centered. Oh, and look, we found more questions, and we still have 6 minutes, so I'll start with Commissioner Carter.
Realizing that we had a little time, I just wanted to chime in and also offer a thanks, and particularly to Director Berry for the work that you have led to engage with community in such an involved way in every area of the work that we're looking at for child and family well-being. We just want to thank you so very much for your leadership, and certainly know that Ramsey County is being called on because of the approach that we have taken together with the community to walk hand in hand in leadership of changes that are being suggested at the state level. Appreciate your brave engagement with community around the African American Family Preservation Act, and for your leadership with others to bring them into this discussion, and certainly with Melissa Finnegan, who has been our core person in that regard, but with your leadership and guidance and direction in the discussion. So thank you so much to all who have leaned into that discussion and who have made it a wholesome one that has opportunity for the future to result in many of the changes that are needed and being suggested there. Again, thank you very much to Director Berry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. And looks like Commissioner McGuire still has one last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Both of my previous colleagues have just made me think about this question. And of course, I know this entire board is going to be supportive of whatever legislation you have, and we stand by to help with that. And Commissioner Carter mentioned how you've engaged the community. I'm just curious. This feels like it's just where that you're really leading in this area. Have you been able to engage a lot more of the counties? Because I know statewide, if we would get more support, that this would be better for legislation. And I'm just curious if you found other counties. I know that Hennepin is aligned with us on this. Just was curious what other counties have been feeling.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioner, yes, we have had other counties. So we've had MAXA representation. We have had other counties, DHS. We've really tried to make this process as cooperative as possible, and counties are in very different places. I mean, very different places. There are counties that will not want law enforcement out of the business of removing children. We will, maybe with Hennepin and maybe St. Louis, there'll be a few counties that may stand separate from other smaller rural counties that just don't have the workforce 24/7 that we might have. So we're going to have to navigate that through the process, because one thing we've learned is just one way of doing it does not work for everybody across the state and does not work for all children and families. So yes, we're going to have to do some shaping, but to get back to your original question, we have been working with other counties, we've been working with MAXA, trying to move everybody along to a place where we can get 90% agreement on what would be in legislation.
And I'm not surprised to hear that. Thank you so much. You're amazing at trying to bring people together. So really appreciate that.
Well, it is 11:58. We're committed to wrapping up this part of our day at noon. I'm not sure if Karen Soltis would like to say a final word, or County Manager O'Connor would like to say anything before we wrap up this portion of our day.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to thank all the presenters today and all the staff across the Health and Wellness Service Team. As you have heard, there's lots of really great work going on in our service team in conjunction with other service teams across the county. Want to thank you for your continued support as we move forward through all these challenging times, but do really appreciate your support. Your vision, mission, goals really inspire us to do great work and work with the community. So thank you, and we look forward to talking with you again on August 11th. We'll finish the workshop at that time. Thank you.
Sounds good. We'll see you then. And in our last minute, I'll just point out that Commissioner Reinhardt has her census shirt behind her. So fill out your census before they come knock on your door in August. And see you this afternoon.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to all of you, and this board meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.